first one was just a test. See if you guys are paying attention. So I'm going to call to order the June 6, 2019 City of Boulder Planning Board meeting, and maybe somebody can close that back door. Thank you, Sarah. So one thing before we move into the agenda is a quick agenda revision. Item 5A, which is our only public hearing item tonight, has been removed from the agenda. The application has been withdrawn by the applicant. There will not be an opportunity for us to review it or for you to speak to it during that. If for some reason you're here to speak to that item and you still want to talk to us, you'll want to do that during public participation. And then,
just to make clear, you might want to mention what that item is beyond 5A.
That was my next word. And then later in the agenda under matters, item 6, is a discussion of the Alpine Balsam area plan options, which is basically a pretty confined conversation for us to give staff feedback about what kinds of scenarios they should be putting forward to the public. It's not a big, robust discussion. So if you do want to speak to the planning board on that, you'll want to sign up with Cindy over here and speak to us during public participation as well. So there's no public hearing on that item. Okay, so the first item on our agenda is the approval of minutes, and I think several people, including me, have provided feedback and comments on those. We just have one set May 16th. Does anyone make a motion on those?
I will move to approve the minutes as amended by the multiple amendments submitted by planning board members to the planning board email and Cindy.
Second.
Okay, moved by Harmon and seconded by John, whose last names I'm not saying right now, I guess. So I'm going to call the question. All in favor of approving those minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Cool. All in favor. So now we're going to move to public participation. This is a time in the meeting where you get to sign up with Cindy and speak to us about anything that is not on the public agenda, public hearing items, which is everything. Everything on the planet is not on the public hearing items list today. So we have a few folks signed up, and I'll be calling you up sort of 3 at a time. So if you don't mind getting up and standing next to Cindy so you're ready to speak when your time comes, it saves a little bit of time for everybody. And so I'll call you up 3 at a time. So the first person is Kathleen Hancock. The second person is Francesca Silva. And then Tom Delvecchia. Sweet. I'm going to claim that I got that one right, which is totally a lie. So, all right, Kathleen, you're up. Everybody, and just so you know, sorry, everybody has 3 minutes. There's a little light on there that at 2 minutes it turns yellow, and then at 30 seconds it turns red. I think we've got it, or something like that. Anyways, you got 3 minutes. Watch the light. Try to wrap up on time. Otherwise, I'll probably interrupt you.
I think you have a half a minute left when it's yellow.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Are we ready?
We are ready.
Okay. Hi, good evening. My name is Kathleen Hancock. I live on 5th Street, about a half mile from the Alpine Balsam site. I'm here to speak about that project. I'm part of a neighborhood group called Think Boulder. We became concerned that our neighbors were not sufficiently informed about what was happening at the site. People just did not know the details. Working with 2 market researchers, an architect and a website designer, all of whom volunteered their time, we created a survey with some housing options for people to consider: 53, 110, and 330. At the time, that was the city's upper number. We also asked people what they knew about the costs, the proposals, what they'd like to see at the site, what they were worried about, and so on. You can see all our results on our website, thinkboulder.org. We created this group specifically for this project. There have been a few mischaracterizations of the survey and our findings in the Daily Camera and other places, and so I wanted to just address those tonight. First of all, we went well beyond our member group. We are 130 right now, but we had 533 respondents, so this is not just our group by any stretch. We handed out flyers to every house in the surrounding neighborhoods and at the shopping centers. We now purport to speak for the neighborhood, not the entire city. So in other words, our survey was never meant to cover the entire city, just our particular area, which will be most affected. The city's own survey, which did not target any one area, got 100 respondents. So again, we got a lot of respondents. Also, I would just note they also supported the low density option, which is what our group supported as well, or the findings of our respondents. Our survey is statistically significant. This means we had enough respondents to draw statistically meaningful inferences and that the answers are stable. In other words, if we had a whole bunch more people fill it out, we would still get the same results. As our representatives consider, quote, what the neighborhood wants, it should be noted how many people we are representing with this survey. There are some others here who are talking about high density. I don't think that they have done that same kind of level of analysis to see what neighbors want. Going forward, I have a few suggestions for planning regarding improved engagement that maybe you all could echo if you agree. One is, I think, creating a special email alert for high-stakes controversial issues such as this one would be really helpful. The bi-monthly newsletter comes very late. For example, on Tuesday at 3 o'clock, I got the notice that there would be a council meeting that night at 6, so that is not enough time to do anything. 2, more mailings to neighbors. We found that this was really successful. And third, to give a publicly understandable presentation on the traffic study. It is very technical, very dense. It concludes it's not a problem, and I think just at a gut level, most of us living in the area don't think that's realistic. It must have some kind of effect. So thank you for your time and the work that you're doing for the city.
Great. Thanks, Kathleen. So up next is Francesca Silva, Tom Delvecchia, and then Nikolai. You guys are killing me with the names tonight. This is really good. Afransauer? Say again? Afanasenko. I got closer. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for letting me speak this evening. My name is Francesca Silva, and I live on 10th Street, just north of the Alpine Balsam site. At the City Council meeting on Tuesday, I spoke with the woman in the audience and realized that she thinks when I say low density and keeping with the character of the neighborhood, that I mean single-family homes, but that is absolutely not what I mean. And to be clear, I think 2- or 3-story housing at the Alpine Balsam site would fit in nicely with the neighborhood. What I object to is 3- to 5-story housing buildings at 2 to 3 times the density of Holiday on North Broadway. This most definitely would change the character of the neighborhood. I've made some rough calculations based on what Aaron Brockett said at the meeting the other night. Aaron said that the Holiday complex ranges from 12 to 20 units per acre. If you take the 8 acres at Alpine Balsam, take away roughly 2 acres for the medical pavilion and flood mitigation, a Holiday density complex would result in 96 housing units. This is completely reasonable. What I object to is 2 or 3 times that density, which is what the City Council is considering with option 3, 230 to 300 housing units. My point tonight is to ask that the Planning Department communicate with the neighbors and citizens in Boulder in a way that makes it easier for us to envision what the densities of the options are truly going to look like. I heard the mayor ask the staff to perhaps present more detailed drawings and/or photographs so that we can all understand the difference between, say, 150 units and 300 units. I think there are a lot of misconceptions floating around about density. Although I think the neighborhood outreach by the Planning Department has been fine in terms of making themselves available and having multiple meetings at various times on various days, et cetera, I do have a strong concern about how the data on what the community wants is collected. I would ask that in this next go-around of neighborhood outreach, that the staff keep an accurate record of who is voicing their opinion, whether or not they live in Boulder, and how many times they are re-voting, so to speak. The survey at CU Boulder last November was a great example of good data collection, and I hope the Planning Department will do more of that as we go forward. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Francesca. Next is Tom Delvecchia. Then we got Nikolai and David Adamson.
Hello. I'm here to speak on an item 5A, which, as you all know, has been dropped. So I'm not sure if I'm beating a dead horse here or if they even have a horse in this race. But if you think of another analogy involving horses, please let me know. My name is Tom Delvecchia, and I am one of the residents at 1852 Arapahoe Avenue, the property up for review. Now, I don't have a long history in Boulder. In fact, I've only lived here for a little over a month. And while I can't speak from the point of view as a long-standing Boulderite, what I can provide is a perspective that only a fresh set of eyes can give. And I hope you can hear what I have to say with a sense of utility. Now, one of the first things I recognized about Boulder, apart from the beautiful backdrop that is the Rocky Mountain Range, was its charming array of small businesses. And at a glance, it's easy to regard this property as better suited for one of those businesses. But to merely regard its architectural structure as a basis to make that claim would be short-sighted. If we want to make a justified decision regarding the proposed conversion of this building into its previous commercial use, then we can't look back in time to validate that claim, only forward. Now, Boulder is undoubtedly a very walkable city. It makes sense why a business would want to acquire this location. But the degree to which this acquisition would make the area more walkable is eclipsed by the impact it would have on the preservation of affordable residencies. Lest we forget that the property up for review is but a brisk 5-minute walk to Boulder's crown jewel of commerce, that is Pearl Street. This is why the preservation of housing in this area is paramount to the continued development of commercial property. Furthermore, the applicant up for review has already established their location just 1 block away. This isn't a question of whether the city could benefit from the addition of a restaurant. It's a question of whether affordable housing should be cast to the wayside over the marginal relocation of an existing restaurant. And in a town that's notoriously gentrified, we're running out of opportunity to keep places like this home around. Now, the zoning regulations that this city has instantiated regard this area as densely residential, and there have been a few exceptions to this, no doubt. A block in either direction will land you at a fly fishing shop or a motorcycle shop. But these examples shouldn't comfort the idea of welcoming Snarf's 4th location. On the contrary, they should serve as a reminder of how the residential real estate needs to maintain its place at the top of the hierarchical distribution this board has decreed. Now, I've had to take a step back at times while thinking about this and acknowledge the bit of comedy this situation lends itself. I mean, if I can speak in layman terms for just a moment, we're talking about a burger joint that's trying to take away the artist's house. And you have to admit, it's a bit like a screenplay. But with that narrative in mind, you can see the obvious dynamic of protagonist versus antagonist. And I know in my heart of hearts how that movie ought to end. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak on the matter.
Great, thanks, Tom. Appreciate you hearing from you, even though that item has been taken off the agenda, so thanks. So Nikolai, David Adamson, and then Charles Manlove.
Hi, may I close this and put mine? Or this?
Sure.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Nikolai Afanasyenkov. I'll be speaking on that same issue, canceled item 5A. I flew here across from the East Coast, took time off of my summer internship to speak here. I'm a CU Boulder student of computer science. The conversion of the residential unit into a proposed restaurant, thereby displacing its longtime resident, me. And I'm getting there. And Joanna, of course. It's all in the speech. I've lived at 1852 Arapahoe Avenue, the residence in question, for nearly 6 years. The Blue House, as we fondly refer to it, is my home. It is the home of my roommates, Joanna and Tom. I'm the single leaseholder, and I have been for years, and will continue to hold the lease now that the plans have been withdrawn. I've talked to the owner today. Prior to cancellation, I intended to come here and ask your board to block the plans to develop our residence into a commercial venue. Our case draws a parallel with a similar review of the same property of our residence in 2013. The planning department recommended denial of the conversion in 2013 because it would have eliminated the residential space. Staff cited for its recommendation a Boulder Municipal Code statute regarding the conversion of dwelling units to non-residential units, stating there shall be a presumption against approving the conversion of dwelling units in the residential zoning districts to non-residential uses. We live in a densely residential area, and our situation certainly falls under this statute. Furthermore, and on a more personal level, my journey to turn Blue House into our musical, artistic, community-oriented home has been arduous, and lifelong memories have been made along the way. The Blue House is one of the very few non-commercial strongholds of music and creativity left in Boulder, a city that purports to be creative and cultured. The creative community needs cultural landmarks like my house to remain in the hands of its residents and the people interested in sharing the valuable resource of space where we can make music and art and celebrate life together, no matter the hour, without worrying about how much money the bar is making. My home and studio space creates such a powerful place for people to meet each other, one of the few places left in Boulder where artists have a chance to collaborate. The Blue House has been a cultural hub for nearly a decade, a place where art meets music, and a home for the musicians and artists that are being more and more alienated in our city every year. The Blue House has been rented by members of Boulder's artistic family for years. It is a stronghold for musicians and artists and should stay with us, the residents. This house has and continues to enrich lives, provide comfort, housing, and cultural enrichment to us, the residents, and our surrounding community with whom we are involved. In summary, or lastly put, we have been living here and acting as an integral part of our local community for several years. It would be devastating to see our vibrant, artistic, music-filled home lost to commercial development. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikolai. That was great. David Adamson, then Charles Manlove, and then Jorge or George Boone. And if you have not signed up and you want to, this is your chance.
I'll change the time. Let me get you going here
Okay.
first.
I'm David Adamson, 815 North Street, and the Executive Director of Goose Creek Community Land Trust. Land trusts organize local people to build permanently affordable housing on community-controlled land. There's about 250 community land trusts in the U.S. Thistle is a community land trust. None of you live up there at Buena Vista, but there's one right there in Holiday. Thank you so much for your service. So Goose Creek helped convene this neighborhood and citizen group called the Alpine, at that time BCH. The
Actually,
Alpine-
David, let me interrupt you for a second. I'm sorry, I didn't quite notice that you were pulling time until I looked at the clock. So let me just make sure that the folks who we're pulling time with are here. Can you guys, Irina Sidora, Diana Martinez, Robin Rustin, Jamira Ditamel, you guys all here? Okay, cool. Thank you. Sorry for that.
No problem. So we've been working hard from the very beginning. As soon as we knew that BCH only was giving us 6 weeks to keep it from being high-end housing, we organized a group and we worked hard to promote the city acquiring the site, which they boldly stepped forward and did it. It was fantastic. And so I want to go from there with my presentation and urge you to go. So there's one book there that if you don't know about, and it's for sale. You could buy this book. I would make a few dollars on this book, George, if I sold this one book. But anyway, it's a great book by Doug Carr. And so I hope one of you will buy it if you don't have it.
There's a $100 bill in here. Mr.
Oh, darn it. I wonder if someone planted that. Anyway, we're always interested in high community benefit to the site. And as you know, we have a number of very serious crises. Number one is our urgent housing need. We have a very urgent housing need. 60,000 folks have to drive in here every day. 60% of our entire workforce can't live here. And the community preference, the housing preference survey showed 2/3 of them would like to have lived in Boulder. A third of them already bought something else, but a third would buy a compact unit in Boulder right away if it was affordable to them. And what I want to remind everyone that everyone has an interest in beautiful, quiet, unpolluted places to live. I'm a neighbor. I appreciate the neighbors' concern about their neighborhood. I think they have a lot of valid concerns, and so do these people in these cars, all the teachers and mothers and fathers and folks that would like to live in our town, but they cannot. We have a wall around our town, so that's a big crisis. Obviously, the climate crisis and the overall environmental collapse is a crisis. We need to build sustainable habitat for people, and Boulder can do a great job of inspiring people to do that. So, as Rahm Emanuel once said, never let a serious crisis go to waste. So let's use this crisis to relieve a lot of these problems that it creates for us. And I want to emphasize the threat to our businesses and the threat to our city revenue. I talk to businesses every day. They're stressed. They can't retain people. They can't recruit people. They need to move out of town. Nonprofits that we love and prize are stressed about being here. We need to solve this problem. So we were thinking, oh, well, who is it going to be? Well, it's an ever-growing group of neighbors. And again, I applaud the other neighbors. They're concerned about the neighborhood. I think there's a lot of ways we can work together. But we've had a lot of high-level people working for 4 years. 4 years we've been working on this to make sure that this is a high community benefit project. So how are we going to do it? Obviously, we think we can make a big dent at this site with in our housing need and inspire the world with a really brilliant example of how we can have sustainable human habitat. We got a great start with the vision plan. It's a beautiful document. I just want to leave you with I want to urge you to make it a new model, not the same old, not a half measure. What I'm going to argue is a half measure is not giving us the financial return or the social return that we need. So a half measure, I argue that we can have a project that neighbors will love. Every neighbor will love this project if we do it well, and I can understand that there's a risk that we won't. But I want to emphasize those three: equitable, affordable, and sustainable living. And, So we want to start with the values. And I think from the BVCP, we're familiar with those main values, but these, I don't see, we've been so progressive in our words, compact, contiguous development, infill that supports evolution to a more sustainable urban form. That's what Boulder's all about. People fear change. They'd like it the way it is. I understand that. But the climate crisis, the housing crisis, argue that we have to innovate. And Boulder is great at innovating. We've done fantastic work to innovate, and I think we should make sure that we go back and remember our great work with Open Space, Pearl Street, Holiday, CU Greenways. We've done awesome things with land use. Let's do some more of those. Sorry, this innovative, not fearful. It's natural to be fearful. Let's be innovative. We know how to do that. We've got a great innovative population. I just would love for people on the one side of the project. I don't really believe they talked to anybody on our side of the project. I didn't get it. No, nothing was dropped on North Street. Maybe it was, But there's a lot of neighbors who support this more compact development that is expressed in our Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. Okay, here's an example of, and I apologize, there's something going on with my project here, but there's a little picture of Valbonne. How many at the top there? How many are familiar with Valbonne in Germany? So Valbonne is a former French military base that's in Germany, just in Germany, that's a 90-acre car-free suburb. People love this place. It's a beautiful example of European social housing. We worked together with Jamie Logan, a top architect. We looked at the site plan, we looked at the city's scenarios, and we felt that you could put some more square footage of housing in there. We did an example of a housing that could be on Balsam that would be mostly, you'd see 3 stories, and the 4th and 5th stories are stepped back. So we thought there could be more square footage of housing on this site than the city looked at. I wasn't impressed with the city's really wanting to meet our urgent housing need. I didn't see that. I didn't see a real deep desire. Look, we really want to meet our urgent housing need. I haven't seen that in the process. It's disturbing to me. I also say we could put some affordable office there. We desperately need this as well. So how many of you have been to the Alliance Center down in Denver? Okay, so that's 50,000 square feet of NGO space. I've been talking to those people. It's a successful model. We could put something like that on it, sell that space, and sell some commercial office space there. Again, we're trying to get social return and city financial return. If there's anything you remember from my talk tonight, it's let's ask every scenario, every amount of housing to show what is its financial consequences. If you have less housing out on that site, how is it going to make a return to the city? How is it going to do that? It's going to be super subsidized. We can't just do a capital investment for a few affordable housing units. That's not the way to do it. Our method here is the more middle income, permanently affordable, modest-sized units that we sell, the more money the city gets back. The more units that we have that we sell to middle-income people that are small that they can afford, we can build them for less than they cost to sell. We don't have to subsidize it at all. That's a model for the whole city. We want this project to be a model for the whole city. That people see we can all live beautifully together. We can have diversity. We can have employment. We can have a place for our public employees. Again, I apologize, the right show just didn't get on there, but
Take your time.
okay. Well, this was the site plan that we did. Then we did a further iteration of that. Jerry Shapin's a very talented landscape architect. And I just want to end by talking, and I hope you might have a question or two. I want to also emphasize the importance, I suppose I should stay by the microphone. Yeah. I want to emphasize the importance of connections between this site and open space. So we have our North Street Eco District, and I want to emphasize the Eco District. How many of you are familiar with ecodistricts.org? Okay, the Eco District approach. So having a WUNRF or a sort of a car-free parkway that goes from the site through Alpine or North Street or both to Sanitas, and then one that goes down Balsam. You're already planning the 13th Street one. Let's really innovate in this town, bringing the open space, the jewel of our whole society, into our town this way. So kids, how many of you have kids? Okay, what a bummer it is at 4 o'clock that we have to, no, it's not a bummer. We get to talk to them in the car, one of the few times they'll talk to us, but kids could get around a lot easier in this town if we had a lot more safe bike, these kind of walkways. All right, well, I really appreciate your time, and I really look forward to us all working together and making sure that lower density options are costed out. What is the real cost of doing that? I think it's substantial.
Thank you, David. Okay, next up is Charles Manlove, then George Boone, and then Beth Hondorf.
Good evening. I'm Charles Manlove. I live on 10th Street between Balsam and Cedar, and I'm not representing any group. I speak for myself. My biggest issue, I'm talking about Alpine Balsam, obviously. My biggest concerns have to do with process. And clearly, the staff is confused about the process. The first sentence in the memo confuses the vision plan for redevelopment of the hospital property with area planning. There's been a lot of process so far about the redevelopment of the former hospital property. To my knowledge, there's been no public engagement or process on an area plan. I mean, there's a 160-page memo here, which represents a lot of work by staff and consultants, but there's been nothing, to my knowledge, and I live in the area, and certainly I could have missed it, but then there's questions about how the staff's reaching out to the community. One of my big concerns is that there's a conflict of interest, and it isn't a legal one because this isn't a site review, but the staff that's doing all of the work for a concept plan for the ultimately site review of the redevelopment of the hospital property is the same people who are going to be doing the area plan. And that is, the goals of those two things are very different. The goals of the property owner for redeveloping property are not the same as the goals of the community in putting together an area plan and what we would like to see the future of this larger area be. And part of that larger area plan needs to be, where does redevelopment happen, how much redevelopment happens. We might not want all of it on this one site. We might want it spread around differently to make a better community center, neighborhood center, than putting it all in one corner of this area. But you don't figure that out without doing the area plan. The area plan needs to come before a site plan for this redevelopment. I have a big problem with the speed at which this area plan is being pushed forward through the summer. It's going to be really hard to get community engagement in a meaningful way. And I have a big problem with, council on Tuesday put forward removing one of the 4 or 5 options that's on there, option 1. I have a problem with them constraining the range of the discussion before the discussion with the public has even begun. I was deeply involved with the North Boulder Subcommunity Plan as a member of the planning board on the steering committee for that. I used to sit on your side of the Diaz for 5.5, almost 6 years. So that process, the first thing we did was determine where the boundaries needed to be in the discussion. But we did that with the public. The public defined those boundaries. And that's an important part of getting buy-in with the community on whatever plan you come up with. You have to make it the community's plan, not the staff's plan, not the consultant's plan, not city council's plan, or the planning board's plan. It has to be the community's plan. An additional sort of monkey wrench is the boundaries of this plan were defined by staff and perhaps should have included Iris and Broadway since there's this land swap discussion going on. And that really is germane to the area plan discussion.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Next up is George Boone and then Beth Hondorf. And if anyone else wants to sign up, this is a good time to do it.
Hi, my name is George Boone. I live at 2815 7th Street. My sister lives on Jefferson Street. My parents live on Spruce Street. We're a multi-generational Boulder family. And living close to the Alpine Balsam site, I've had concerns from the beginning around the anchoring of FAR and the vision plan around 2.5 to 3.0 FAR that was targeted initially without any community feedback and inserted in there. When I brought that up to the city, they acknowledged that that was inserted in there, not by the community, but they would not withdraw it or acknowledge it publicly on any written statement and withdraw that because it had already been passed through. I think that targeted FAR and the bias at that very beginning of that process has continued through. My other concern is speaking with Aaron Brockett, who's a friend of mine for over 20 years, he told me that if he was on city council when the city would have bought that, he would have voted against it because it was far too costly. And as we can tell now, as we've gone through more diligence, we're going to be $80 million plus just before we get out of the ground on that site, which begs the question, are we trying to create density to build ourselves out of a problem that we created by buying land that was way too costly for something like this? I would argue that the city should acknowledge its mistake in buying the land at that price and acknowledge it now and go ahead and subsidize the development of the housing and other uses there so it fits into the character of the neighborhood. As it relates to Mr. Adamson's discussion here, I want to disclose that he wishes to be a developer on the site and get personal financial gain. I'm not trying to get personal financial gain out of this. I'm a neighbor concerned. I'm also part of the group of over 500 people that responded to that survey, which wanted low-density housing in that area that made sense for our community. And again, to Francesca's point, low-density housing doesn't mean necessarily single-family homes, but it means respecting the view corridors and the character of the neighborhood that surrounds it. As it relates to struggling businesses, I would also rebut that the shopping centers at Broadway and Ideal are some of the strongest shopping centers in the entire state. There are businesses that have been there for over 50 years. They are not struggling businesses. They are not in demand of consumers. None of those businesses, except one or two, have gone out of business in the past 20 to 30 years. So I would consider all those things when you're looking at this area. It's an area that works already, and we want to make sure that the character of the neighborhood remains consistent. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So then last up is Beth Hondorf.
Thank you for listening to us. I'm Beth Hondorf. I've lived at 4th and Alpine since 1976. Number one on my list is a bike path. I've been to these meetings and they keep saying there's no room on Broadway. There is room on Broadway. It's a state road. You can do eminent domain. You can have parking only on one side, but this is dangerous. We need it now. And I can't even believe you would move forward with this project without putting the bike path first. I have a real estate background, and obviously, you know, highest and best use is what people want out of their property. Well, I think this property is like adjacent to Central Park in New York. It's one of the most valuable properties in this town. And so, I mean, if you really want to do something for people and needy people that need money, sell it. You know, get the $2,000 a square foot, the high-end developers you're getting, and put it where it should be, developing other core areas for low-income people. Now, I know that's not going to happen, so what I would propose is have mixed use of low income and some super, super high, the priciest units you can find in Boulder, even if there's only 5 of them. Sell them and take the money and put it into a cash fund for needy people or affordable housing in Boulder. The height, I don't think helps anybody. I don't think anybody likes it. It should be no higher than what it is. What I'm really worried about is what happened on the west end of Boulder. It's the proximity, it's the same thing, and pricing and lifestyle is going to move to there. And I go there quite often, and it's basically a bunch of drunks. There's DUIs. I see people driving the wrong way. We don't need that to move north. We need to take control of the problems we have already. So if you do put housing there, I hope it's not a mix of bars and high-end restaurants like the West End. We were supposed to have a movie theater, more family-oriented. We didn't. They closed Mapleton. My kid went there. He was kicked out of there. They said we would have an exchange of, affordable housing for children at 311. We didn't get that. And I'm really concerned that no one has listened to what the neighborhood wants. We've got people voting on things, and then they get a job with Joe Goose. I mean, it's pretty obvious what's happening, and I want people to vote, honestly. The other thing is, I really think there's so much, all these planning people tell me the core area. This city is getting big enough that there's other core areas you need to put attention to, not just here. And some of these dollars could be well spent in other parts of town, like South Boulder or East Arapahoe. And the last is, no matter what you put there, you need to change the requirement of only 3 unrelated people living together. That's just archaic. We don't even have many families anymore. We have a very high abortion rate in this part of town. Let 5 unrelated live together so it's affordable.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Beth. No one else has signed up, correct? Okay, so we can move into the discussion of dispositions, planning board call-ups and continuations. We have 2 call-ups in front of us tonight. One is for a subdivision of a lot at 1032 and 1050 Hawthorne, and that call-up period expires today. And then we've got another call-up for a wetland variance to allow some underpass art to happen, and that can be called up before June 14th. Does anyone want to discuss either of those items?
Just had a question about the wetland variance.
Okay, I think we do have city staff. Yeah, I got to lean forward and talk about.
Yeah, thank you.
I do believe we have city staff here who can answer questions about the underpass art project on Arapahoe. You guys want to come up to the podium up here?
Hi, so I don't actually want to call this up. I'm just sort of curious how this project went so far down the line before it became clear that there was this conflict with the wetlands rules and regulations.
Sure. Forgive me if this is a misunderstanding, but I actually don't think it's gone too far down the line. We're still in preliminary design, and so we didn't want to advance it beyond that before we got a red light or green light in response to it. So with the public art selection process, there's a group of community members that will give their feedback and then greater outreach beyond that. At that point, we had technical review committee, which is all city staff, so folks from development services, folks from all of the different entities that would be impacted, including transportation, parks, development services. And they gave feedback and kind of helped us understand what check-ins we would need to do along the way. And so at this time last year, we met with the Greenways Advisory Committee, and I know Harmon was kind enough to sit in on that one for us. So we had a check-in and then went through city steps to put together a proposal for this variance, and has come along from there.
So just what, maybe I'm asking the wrong, maybe I should be asking Harmon, what are the potential impacts on the wetlands? I'm assuming it's about the creatures that live around and swim through. So what sort of survey work has been done just to understand what the impacts might be?
Do you want to take that?
Alicia Geiger, Flood and Wetland Administration. So they've actually hired a wetland consultant and has done some reports. And what the art project is actually doing is just going to be mimicking daylight and moonlight. And so it's taking a dark space and just turning it into what you would have if there wasn't a bridge over it. And so there's not been discovered a big concern about doing that in this area because it is kind of a city center area.
Alicia, I'm going to add on to that. The art is it's a kind of a washy approximation of the surface of water, and it's shot onto the overpass. And it sounds pretty beautiful. And we were concerned about whether that would be keeping the trout and the little invertebrates that live in the creek awake. The light bulb that provides the light produces 1,100 lumens. It's about the amount of light produced by an old 75-watt incandescent bulb. It's on a perpetual celestial calendar. So it's mimicking day and night cycles that match the day and night cycles throughout the year. And it will forever, as long as it's got power. And the overpass actually creates artificial shade. So to the extent that it's adding a teeny bit of light in the daytime and an even teenier bit of light, like 50 lumens at night, it's almost unnoticeable to any creature living in there. But it also actually gets us a little bit closer to what life would be like under the overpass if there wasn't an overpass. On top of that, it's an extremely, well-used intersection, 13th and Arapahoe, with the most used bike path in the entire city. And one of the people on the Greenways Committee pointed out that his light on his bicycle, which can be aimed directly into the water, depending on how he's got his handlebars turned, had 1,800 lumens. So with that, we had asked as many questions as we could think of about the impacts of this art project on the natural environment and come to the conclusion that they were negligible, if not beneficial.
Great.
And beautiful.
Those were my questions. There were some unanswered questions. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So we'll move on into zipping beyond our non-existent public hearing items into matters. We have one item under matters, which is Alpine Balsam Area Plan, opportunity for us to put a little bit of feedback into the public process before it goes back out again. So do you guys need some time to set up? Should we take a quick break, or are you good?
I think we can do it really quickly.
Okay, cool. Harmon's a pretty good singer. He can fill the time.
Harmon can harmonize.
So I think as you guys introduce this, I just want to say that it seems like it's important, having looked at the city council meeting, to also explain to us what you're not asking for, so we can really focus our conversation and be sure that we're giving you a sort of on-point feedback.
Happy to do that. I'm Jim Robertson, Comprehensive Planning Manager for the City of Boulder. I'm joined by Jean Gatza, Senior Planner in the Comprehensive Planning Division. I'll point out that we also have several other city staff here representing housing interests, flood control interests, transportation interests, and urban design expertise. So hopefully we are prepared to answer any questions or issues you might choose to bring up. I'll just do a brief introduction, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jean. Here's sort of course of action for the evening. As I mentioned, I'll be doing an introduction. Jean will then be talking about the community feedback we've received, recent analysis that's been done, project goals and objectives. We'll talk about one of the major components of what's in front of you, which is land use options. We'll then talk about next steps, and then that says council. That's my fault. That should have been planning board discussion and questions. One of the things that Jean will do, work into her discussion, as the chair just mentioned, we were in front of City Council just 2 evenings ago on this, in addition to meeting your need in terms of telling you sort of what we need or what questions we don't need answered tonight, Jean will weave into her discussion a little bit of an update on the major feedback we got from City Council the other night. Normally it would kind of be the other way around, but this week we'll be giving you what we heard from them rather than in front of them, telling them what we heard from you. So these are the basic questions that we are going to present to you. Jean will be presenting the area plan goals and objectives, and we would like your feedback on those because, of course, those form sort of, if you will, the benchmarks or the metrics against which we will measure is the plan accomplishing the things that we said we would accomplish. What you're going to be seeing tonight are really most of the major components of what will be a draft area plan that will come back for planning board approval and city council approval late summer, early fall. So we want to get your feedback tonight primarily around the issue of do they meet what you believe is an appropriate standard to take to the public? Are there some options that we've presented that should be eliminated? And Jean will tell you what we heard from council the other night, or are there approaches or options that should be added? We also want to make sure we address any questions you have about the major components. And then we are going to give you a little bit of an update on flood issues, and we just want to offer you the opportunity to provide any feedback on those issues. The font here is pretty small, unfortunately. Basically, on the left side, you have, this largely mimics a diagram you've seen before, which is a sort of circular diagram on the city's engagement framework, including identifying opportunities or issues, developing those options, and engaging the community. And specifically, sort of, that's where we are right now. We're presenting you with options for the area plan. And then the next steps would be make decisions around those key options. And then, of course, we're moving into implementation, which is could include regulatory changes, such as land use and zoning, developing and implementing and improvements for public facilities and so forth, and ultimately, hopefully, achievement of the broad vision for Alpine Balsam. A little bit about what the area plan will do. Essentially, it will define a neighborhood center, which, of course, already exists here. We have a very vibrant neighborhood center, reflecting the vision for Alpine Balsam. I'm going to return in just a moment, the next slide or so, to the notion of neighborhood center. It will guide redevelopment that occurs. It's designed to bring together a common understanding of changes, and probably not only the changes, but things that will remain stable or the same. Make sure that those proposed changes are consistent with our community's vision, identify public improvements. And this last bullet here touches on one aspect that one of the gentlemen who spoke a few moments ago touched on, which is the fact that in this circumstance, in this area plan, the city is one of the major landowners. And so one of the goals is to ensure economic and financial viability, not only for those who live and do business in the area, but from the city's perspective as well as a landowner. I want to return to that notion of neighborhood centers, because that's fundamentally what this is about. This area plan is designed to implement and further the comprehensive plan's vision for a neighborhood center. And of course, the BVCP identifies the general concept of centers as, areas for potential infill and redevelopment, perhaps higher intensity compared to established neighborhoods. The BVCP also speaks specifically about neighborhood centers, and this is a direct quote because it's a little long. I took the liberty of sort of putting in red font what seemed to be the primary salient point here, and I'll just touch on those words. Neighborhood gathering places, meet the day-to-day needs, easily accessible from the surrounding areas by bike, foot, and transit, a sense of place, walkable places, perhaps fulfilling this notion of a 15-minute neighborhood where someone can meet their needs within a sort of walkable 15-minute area. So that's kind of what the BVCP says about neighborhood centers, and that's really in some ways the crux of a lot of what all of this discussion and that we'll hopefully have with you tonight and later is about. With that, I will Well, actually, I think I'm going to talk to...
one more.
I'm going to talk. Gene tells me I'm talking to this slide. too. As I mentioned a moment ago, what's in front of you in the packet, and including a number of the attachments, is essentially much of the, if you will, the guts of what will be a draft area plan that will be brought in front of, that will be shared with the community, and then ultimately brought in front of you and the City Council late summer, early fall. It includes, of course, the background, vision, goals, and objectives, which we'll be talking about tonight, and then some key components, land use map, urban design guidelines, access and mobility recommendations, recommendations around transportation demand management, flood and stormwater strategy, and then strategies and recommendations around various facility services in order to ensure that that implementation of this vision is manageable from the point of view of the infrastructure that will support it. And then, of course, the area plan will also include some recommendations on implementation and next steps. With that, I will turn it over to Gene Gatza, who will walk from there.
Thanks, Jim.
Very good. Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to start with a quick orientation to the planning area's character districts. So our character district 1 is really the heart of the neighborhood center, as Jim mentioned. This is really about this neighborhood center. It includes the retail center, the community plaza and ideal market shops, the east block of the city site, including the pavilion and the parking structure, as well as the Boulder Medical Center at Balsam and Broadway. Character District 2 really focuses on the rest of that city, the hospital redevelopment site, the center and west blocks of that city site, including, this area includes the 2 private parcels on the southwest corner there by 9th Street that are not part of the city site. Character District 3 is really 2 areas that serve as the north and south gateways for the neighborhood center along Broadway. The south gateway includes mixed use, both commercial and residential uses, as well as historic buildings on the west side of Broadway, and the 1 to 2 story commercial buildings with surface parking on the east side. This area presents some of the opportunities for changes to encourage housing. The North Gateway is primarily high-density residential, and it already provides a transition to the residential uses and densities further north into the neighborhood center, and we have no changes proposed at the North Gateway. The South Gateway, oh wait, I talked about that. Wait. Okay. All right, that was where. North Gateway and South Gateway. Character District 4, the transitional mixed-use area includes the block between Alpine and North that's east of 9th Street. The current uses are a mix of residential, medical, and commercial office uses, and there's a good amount of surface parking. The non-residential areas of this district are places where some of the options can suggest some changes to add housing. Character District 5 reflects several areas where existing housing or civic uses function very well, and the options reflect the vision to preserve these areas with no changes preserved. Many folks have expressed appreciation for the current mix of residential types and densities, especially the block of Portland Avenue east of 9th Street, as well as how these areas serve to transition to the lower density housing in the outer areas. And next, I'm going to share some key things that we've heard from the community engagement and the analysis that's been completed over the past year that's shaped the options. And I do want to mention, just to clarify, I know we talked about this in February when we were back, when we were with you. We did host small group workshops focused on questions about the area and the area plan in January and February of this year. So many different opportunities for small group discussions that were really focused about the area.
Can I ask you a question, Brian? Dean, I recollect being part of a workshop maybe 3 or 4 years ago, though, about this, where we had multicolored blocks and we built up blocks at various tables. There were 40 or 50 people there.
That was for the vision. That was in the vision plan process that led up to the adoption of the vision plan.
Okay, yeah, I just didn't see it mentioned in the packet, but I thought it might have influenced some of the original thinking for this.
Yeah, I think that We could have laid out all of the engagement and all of the work that led up to the vision plan, as well as all the engagement and work that was afterwards. We really focused on the area planning process that kicked off last May.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Harmon. Okay, key themes from community engagement. Neighborhood quality of life is high. I think we all recognize that this is a very special part of the city that results from the mix of people, the mix of housing, the character and safety of the residential areas, the walkability and access to activity in the park, center, downtown, and the mountains. I can just attest to the passion that I heard from the folks that we listened to at the small group workshops. It was pretty extraordinary. The neighborhood center functions well and is well loved. People appreciate the current look and feel of the center, as well as the easy access to a range of retail, commercial, and medical uses in the area. There are mixed views on housing and density, as you've heard, and as I know that you've received many messages about. Some of the neighborhood residents have concerns about adding too much housing on the city site or in the area that's too big or boxy or doesn't fit, that might negatively impact parking, traffic, or services or other visual character. Conversely, others see this area as an ideal location to add density and to address critical housing needs in an innovative and attractive way. Recreation, open, and green spaces. This came up a lot. People love North Boulder Park, but as the area changes, other green and other open spaces are going to be very important for connections and places to gather. Changes for flood mitigation should be very carefully considered. On access and mobility, people appreciate the current ability to walk, bike, take transit, and to drive in the area. There are concerns, as you've heard, about the parking and the traffic. And people suggested many improvements for safety, ease of moving through the area with or without a car, and to promote all-mode mobility. We had a lot of feedback about redevelopment of the city site over the last year, as well as in the groups when we were talking about the area. People want this to be very thoughtful and innovative. They want the redevelopment to fit in, to support the neighborhood center, to add value, and have good public spaces. People want housing that helps meet affordability goals, but they also want open spaces, welcoming spaces to gather, and a little retail along with the city service hub. The results from some of our studies, I'll touch on next. We had a traffic impact study. Some of those results were included in the attachments of your packet. The traffic impact studies suggest that changes in trips and traffic from any of the options can be accommodated by the existing roadway network, and any of the changes from redevelopment on the site would generate fewer trips than what was estimated to have been generated from an active hospital. Our consultants also made recommendations about the access and mobility strategy. On our flood mitigation, staff and consultants have explored many options for flood mitigation for both the site and the wider area. The results indicate that it's not possible to construct flood mitigation in North Boulder Park without significant impacts to the park, and we recommend taking that off the table. Even if mitigation could address the 100-year flood event in this stretch of Upper Goose Creek, there's limited ability east of 13th Street to continue with those improvements. For the Alpine Balsam site, we recommend proceeding with site-specific mitigation. This includes pursuing conveyance at the north side of the site and not the center greenway. The Upper Goose Creek flood mitigation study will proceed in evaluating potential flood mitigation improvements in the reaches that are downstream of the Alpine Balsam site, and that's going to proceed in a different schedule than the area plan. Some findings about affordable housing. Making progress toward the affordable housing goal is a primary objective for the area plan and for the site redevelopment. What we know about affordable housing is for private development in the area, affordability will likely be addressed through the city's inclusionary housing program and likely cash in lieu. For the city site, we have more leverage and control. We know that the density directly affects the ability to support a development of sufficient size to leverage state and local federal funds for a 100% affordable project. We also know that there will need to be a mix of market rate and affordable units, and for the market rate to contribute cash in lieu to help support the whole project. Affordable housing outcomes are best supported on the site with more flexibility in future zoning for parking, building heights, and density. Regarding the goals and objectives, Jim mentioned we wanted to check in on these. The planning board has seen the draft goals and the various check-ins that we've had about this project over the past year. And we have the goals built upon the direction that was in the adopted vision plan. And we've added these clarifying objectives that are based on further analysis, option development, and the community feedback. There were a few that the City Council emphasized and talked about at the discussion on Tuesday. Some were, a couple notable ones were around the in land use and urban design, and this I'm going to refer to the objectives more specifically that are in the memo. Around cascading density from Broadway out and making sure that that's an element of any of the options. They talked a bit about the really emphasizing the neighborhood center mix of uses, characteristics, and preserving the real viability of the neighborhood center, the commercial part of the neighborhood center, and then also the historic preservation objectives that are in the urban design section. Objectives goal that you can find, that you can see in your memo. I'm sorry, it's way too much to have on a slide up here, so I have to point to what you have in the memo. Okay, with that, land use options. There were 5 options that we developed that emphasized different goals, focused around the critical need for housing and how the area might change to add housing. With each of these options, we developed some rough estimates for potential new units in the area. And you have the cheat sheets in front of you that have the table and a bit of information on each option in front of you. I do want to emphasize that these are very high-level projections. They're based on blanket assumptions for dwelling units per acre. They don't really take into account specific parcels or any of that. We really just wanted to do something to show some order of magnitude about the potential for redevelopment over time. And I think this was another piece that was that the council discussed too, of the difference between the redevelopment on the site, which we know will redevelop and we have more control over, and suggesting different land use changes in the area, because that's really the longer term thinking about the vision for the area. So parcels might redevelop over time, but it's certainly not anything that's being forced to happen, as you know. So it's the changes in land use and then resulting zoning might encourage or incentivize change in the area, but certainly doesn't require it. Okay. Before I jump into the options, I want to talk a little bit about some of the other pieces that were included in your attachment C and that are part of the understanding where we're going with the options land use map and what we mean by these land use prototypes. So I know that the planning board members are very familiar with the land use designations that are in the comp plan that then influence the zoning that we have as that regulatory tool. Land use prototypes is a concept that we've used in the Transit Village Area Plan, and I think we've used in other area planning processes where we can break up those land use types a little bit more to truly help understand what is the character that we're trying to achieve in each of these areas, to get a little bit more specific about unit types, building types, heights, intensities, and really what we want to see, because then we can build that into the area plan, build that into any potential design guidelines, and then help also build that into specific zoning for each of these areas. So as I mentioned, we can do this through lots of different images and also the building height map, where this is going to be one of the tools that through the area planning process we want to explore the potential for changes to the Appendix J height modification map. And with this, we can do that. It doesn't have to be a 35 feet or a 55 feet. We can talk about what that difference within those areas can be. And then lastly, before I get into the options, an urban design. So the attachment C also included these urban design maps that have a lot of detail on them, and they're pretty fun to jump into and really think about. So I want to emphasize that all of the options are going to be considering the recommendations for public realm, public gathering spaces, green spaces, and connections as we move forward thinking about the vision for each of these areas. These urban design elements are going to be very important. Okay. Option 1. Let me come back to this. So option 1, I'm going to talk about each of the options, what they propose for the area, what they propose for the site, and then talk a little bit about the character and the potential for affordable housing for each one of the options. Option 1 proposes few changes in the area, only a few small areas to change land use to reflect the existing higher housing density. There are a couple of areas that have mixed density land use now and the zoning, but are built at a higher density. These changes are proposed to reflect that current density and protect the existing housing, and also to reduce that nonconformity. For the site, the mixed-use business is proposed for the east block because it allows the civic services and a mix of uses. Medium density was proposed on the center and the west blocks based on and that was really based, let me back up. When we've talked about the site and the different scenarios, both last November and February, the feedback that we had from Planning Board and the Council about what we wanted to achieve in housing, we had not intended to include this minimal growth option, but there was a lot of community feedback about the concern for density. We included the medium density option to really show the differences and the potential for the trade-offs around achieving affordable housing on the site. This was big concern to the City Council, and when we asked about each of these options on Tuesday, they did recommend not considering this further because it does not achieve the affordable housing goals on the site. All right. Okay, I'm going to move on to option 2, and we can come back to talking a little bit more about that should we need to later. Option 2 focuses on encouraging future redevelopment in select areas to add housing. Several of the areas are proposed from conversion from commercial and office uses to residential and mixed use. The neighborhood center is proposed for the change to mixed use business, that area in purple, to ensure that the heart of the retail center is maintained and to achieve the vision for neighborhood centers that's in the comp plan. For the site, this option includes the range of higher density prototypes to allow variation in building and housing types and to allow greater flexibility in ways to achieve the affordable housing. The character of the area, the prototypes most closely reflect the mixed density residential in the area, especially to the south, with 2 to 4 stories and a variation of building types. This option offers good potential for affordable housing on the site. Option 3 would steer future redevelopment toward housing units and would allow higher density of housing development. This option suggests converting non-residential uses to housing and proposes a bit more intensity than in option 2 as a way that might show how we might sort of maximize potential in the area. Similar to option 2, and also included in both of the options 4 and 5, the neighborhood center is proposed for that change to mixed-use business to support the comp plan center vision. Option 3 for the site includes the 2 higher density prototypes to allow for variation in buildings and again to maximize the flexibility to achieve affordable housing. The character would include buildings that range from 2 to 4 stories with more areas above 35 feet than is proposed in option 2, and it also offers a good potential for affordable housing on the site. Option 4 is about emphasizing mixed use in the area. So it would allow some intensification of use in the area and allow redevelopment of either business or residential uses. This option acknowledges the desire to preserve many of the locally serving or medical, office, and commercial uses in the area while allowing housing to develop either above or alongside. For the site, option 4 includes the same prototypes as were in option 2 that emphasize housing. The character in the area would be evolving over time to a more mixed use or new housing, and the building heights might increase in some areas to 3 to 4 stories, where they may be 1 to 2 at this currently. Option 5 is similar to option 4 in the recommendations for the area, but for the site, it focuses on developing a significant civic presence. This option was added in consideration of the Boulder County's interest in moving their housing or health and human service functions from the Iris and Broadway site to Alpine Balsam, and requiring a significant civic presence along with the city service center here. We've been working with the county staff to fully understand the county's space needs and parking needs. For this location to be viable for the county, it would require utilizing that entire center block of the site. That would need to accommodate a 120,000 square foot 4-story building, as well as some structured parking for the clients and customers. There's really a lot to consider about this option and several variables that we don't yet know. We are working with the county staff to further understand a lot of those, namely what we might be able to achieve in terms of the housing goals at Iris should this move forward. But there are many variables up there too. So the council member, there was mixed support for this option with the city council, but I think there was a lot of interest in finding out what that trade-off could be, what's really the potential in Iris, to understand that more fully before we take this off the table. So we're going to continue working on that and better understand what those trade-offs might be. Okay, a couple more components that we have to share with the area plan, for the area plan pieces. Access and mobility strategy is a really key part. The proposed strategy is based on the Transportation Master Plan, the Access Mobility Parking Strategy, the Climate Commitment Policy, as well as prior direction about access and parking for the site. It includes shared parking strategy guided by the SUMP principles, creation of a general improvement district to fund ongoing programs and services. There are options for transportation demand management and parking management. There has been interest in expanding the district beyond the site, and that'll be assessed through the engagement process and potentially explored through the implementation planning. The TDM program options include eco-passes, van pooling subsidies, bike share and car share memberships, micro-mobility programs, and mobility on-demand subsidies. We have included a draft connections plan. The planning area already benefits from being very walkable with good bike and transit routes and infrastructure. Access and mobility were a big part of the discussions at the community workshops earlier this year. Community members provided a lot of suggestions on this. Our staff has worked to develop the draft connections plan outlining new opportunities for paths, streets, and other improvements. The draft connections plan reflects that community feedback, as well as work on the low-stress walk and bike network plan with recommendations to build on the strong mobility options in the area for all the modes of travel. We have a proposed community engagement plan in your materials. The purpose of this would be to share the options, the goals, the analysis, trade-off, and the decision-making process and schedule. We intend to be asking community members how these options best meet the goals, what people like about the options and what they don't like, so we can better understand where there's common ground. I think that, as one of the community members, Francesca, talked about, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what we mean by high density, or what we mean by what these land use housing types and land use types mean, and that I think we can come to a lot more find common ground and agreement on how to move forward with options that are acceptable to more people. we think that people are likely to have really better ideas about how to mix and match some of these ideas and how to best achieve the goals, and we want to hear what those are too. We recognize that this is going to happen over the summer months, so we want to offer many different engagement opportunities and venues so that people have the opportunity to engage. Our next steps and schedule are to, as we said, conduct some community engagement in June and July, meet with advisory boards in that time too, primarily the Housing Advisory Board and the Transportation Advisory Board, and then come back to the Planning Board and Council in late summer. And then we're hoping to be able to get direction and public hearing on it with a draft plan at that point, and then have this adopted in September or October. I will note these dates might shift just a little bit as usual with schedules. So with that, we'll come back to the questions that we have before you. The questions are really aimed to ensure that the options and the information we've prepared for the community address the priorities of the City Council and the Planning Board for this area, they reflect the goals and objectives, and they include the desired range of potential changes. We have staff here to answer questions, more specific questions about any of these components, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more about what we heard from the council if you have questions about that.
Great. Thanks very much, Jean. Does anyone have any questions that we need to get off our chest before we go into each of these items, or can we cover everybody's questions under these 4 headings? Go ahead. Yeah.
I get to go first.
You do get to go first.
That's a good one. So I know that you conducted some focus groups and community meetings, and trying to get, I'm hoping, an idea of the kind of people that would like to live there, because we know who lives there already, and we have heard plenty on what they think or don't think about what should happen there. But if we are trying to bring other populations, and that I think behooves us to be aware of what kind of people may be interested or why they may not want to be there. I mean, it can go both ways, right? So if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I can be a little bit facetious and say that I think I've probably talked to at least 300 people that are like, how can I get a unit there, of many different age, household types, and abilities. I think that over the time that our staff and our team have talked to people, there's been a lot of excitement about all kinds of potential housing there and who might live there and who that might be. I think there's a lot of hopefulness around the folks that work in the area to be able to have someplace that's more nearby to live. I know that in talking to some of the folks that work in the shopping center across the street, they come from long distances because of affordability. There's been so much discussion about senior housing there and it being a really great place for folks that don't want to have a car because there are services and shops and centers there. So I think that behooves us. It's a point that we take very seriously, is thinking about who the future residents might be, and we should continue to consider that.
Right. So just to close it on that particular case, so you did talk to people who work in the city but presently cannot afford to live here.
I think, yeah.
They were in the mix.
In much of our engagement, we talk to folks.
Including families, right?
Mm-hmm.
We do have families.
We do have families.
I mean, this might be something we better cover under community engagement plan, but just to earmark it a little bit, I actually think that city staff is a pretty good subset of people who you should talk to about housing needs, since if we end up with an alternative where the city offices move there, 80% of city staff does not live in Boulder, what would allow them to live somewhere nearer than driving out to elsewhere? John, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a couple. We heard from the public comment tonight a couple points that I thought I'd be interested to get your thoughts on. One was from Mr. Manlove about, to some degree, confusing the area plan with the site plan activities, or perhaps confusing is the wrong term, but mixing them and having them move ahead at the same time. And I wondered if what your thoughts were in terms of trying to distinguish between those two.
I'll speak to that briefly, and then I'll let Jean either contradict me or embellish my thoughts. We actually gave a fair amount of thought to that issue in terms of, is there a magical sequence or a better sequence in terms of looking at the broader area and then looking at the land owned by the city. Where we landed on that, of course, is fundamentally doing both simultaneously. And I'll at least present some of the rationale behind that was we felt like it would be imprudent, for example, to decide exactly what should happen on the city-owned land and then sort of figure out, okay, now that we've decided that, how are we going to, mitigate or buffer or respond to the effects of that in the adjacent neighborhood. By the same token, if you look at it the other way, functionally, because now the hospital has moved out of the site, that site is essentially a vacant hole, and we felt like we ought to really take a close look at the neighborhood, including both the negative effects of the hospital departing, the effects of the city or of redevelopment occurring at the site, and we better be looking at the potential synergies and whatever the opposite of synergy would be between those two, without looking only from the neighborhood point of view and then figuring out, okay, what does that mean for the site? So I can understand it both ways. I listened closely to the comment that was made, but I think we tried to strike to take what we felt like was maybe the most prudent approach, which is to simultaneously look at the effects back and forth of both redevelopment of the former hospital site as well as the future of the area within the area plan. Jean, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I'll just try to clarify, because I think it's difficult. It's really hard, because we've got this big looming project, this big change that's going to happen, and then, of course, folks are really focused on that. We also, we heard through the vision plan process, and we know that this is a great area. It's not an area where we know that there needs to be a bunch of changes. We know that there needs to be a lot that's protected about this area, but we also know that with this big change on the site, it's going to affect things in the area, and it's an opportunity to think about the future land uses and the future of this area over that extended planning period. So while the scenarios and the more active community engagement last fall, where we had those the site possibilities, where we were doing the fit tests to truly understand what was possible on the site, and we came back to the community and to the planning board and the council to understand better about what are we really trying to talk about for uses. Are we talking about lots of civic uses? Are we talking about housing, and what types and what shapes? As Jim said, how does that then affect the rest of the areas? So, and then in January and February, we held the small group discussions where we really tried to ask questions about opportunities in the area and what were the things that were important to preserve in the area, as well as we had maps and big sheets of trace where we talked about the access and mobility and the transportation opportunities and suggestions for the area. So while we've been thinking about them together, some of the focus of the different engagements over time have been a little bit different. And now they're all come together. So we're really going to be talking about both the site and the area for these options.
Is also, just to follow up on that a little bit, is it also reasonable to say that there are opportunity sites, in addition to the ones that the city owns, that need to be addressed kind of one way or the other? And we've already seen some of those sort of slip through before there was a wider area plan, like the properties across the street from the hospital site in Old Balsam that have become big single-family homes, or the old Integral Center space, which is becoming, I think, high-end condos or something through a by right process.
Well, as you know, it's our opportunity to really set forth the vision for the area so that can guide any of those individual changes as they become proposed over time.
Cool, thanks. Any other questions for staff before we start going into these topics for real?
Over here.
Oh, sorry.
I actually have some follow-ups from the city council meeting, which I listened to. This was complicated enough that hearing it twice was going to be helpful.
Thank you for bearing through the presentation.
Oh, no, it was great. It's very helpful. So at the city council meeting on Tuesday, City Councilwoman Nagel asked what was the number of units necessary to achieve affordability, and the answer was, I think, 170, and I emailed you all about this. Can you explain what that number means? Like, how does 170 translate into affordability, and just help me to unpack that.
Of course, I think you're asking about the pro forma and the financial analysis and Excel document underpinning all the assumptions.
I don't think quite that much, but I'm going to ask Michelle.
That was going to be my question.
Our housing
asking the same question.
Planner to help us with housing affordability and what it takes for affordable housing projects.
Okay, great.
Good evening. Michelle Allen, Housing and Human Services. So that was sort of a kind of a rule of thumb, obviously, a number that our director, Fern Haber, brought up. And the way he came to that number was to look at a typical affordable housing project that would be funded with a whole host of different funding sources, but including low-income housing tax credits. There's sort of a sweet spot for that kind of a project. Usually it's 100% affordable. Usually it's rental. And the sweet spot used to be about 50. Now we use 60. That number shifts a little bit. But I think for that number he threw out, it was a project of 50 units is what all these funding sources like to create. There's sort of an economy of scale. So if we start with a project that needs 50 units, how much market housing, because market housing supports affordable housing in the way we put together a package to make it all work, right? And he was using the work that we did to come to our inclusionary housing number of 25%. And we did a lot of financial analysis that said that 3 market units could support the creation of 1 affordable unit. So when he was thinking about a project of 50 units, and then it would take 3 market units, so that's 150 units, you come to this number of 200. Again, kind of a big rule of thumb, but it's basically saying that 150 market units can support 1 affordable housing project of 50 units.
Okay, that's very helpful. Can I just ask a couple more questions? Sure. And you'd probably will ask them more intelligently. So it's my understanding that because on the hospital site, the city is a landowner, we can find a mix of rentals and for sale units. In this 1 to 3 ratio, are any of the affordable units for sale? Are any of the market units for sale? Well, I mean, what's a rule of thumb?
Right. Can we have affordable for sale and rental?
And also for the market, affordable or for sale, are they rentals or are they?
Right.
I'm just trying to understand what the breakdown might be.
Right. So our big opportunity is on the city-owned site because we can control some of those outcomes. When we put this package together, and what would happen is we would probably sell off a portion of the project to a market developer, but we can do that with the requirement that they build some amount of for sale housing. If we just sell it off without that requirement right now, and probably for the foreseeable project, you're probably going to see rental development, not for sale. We just don't have a strong for sale development market right now. It's coming around, but it has been primarily rental. So without the requirement or the ability to put the requirement on, you're likely to get a lot of rental and not a lot of for sale. It's a little T reading, but that's what we think.
So I'll say that in the narrative of the package.
So we could kind of drive that outcome. We own the property, we'll sell it to you, but the requirement would be that you put some for sale on there. We could also say that we would like a buyer to put some for sale affordable housing in their project. That reduces the amount of funding we'll get out of the project in the form of cash in lieu, so there's a balance that we would have to look at the whole package. So does that answer your
Yeah, no,
question?
that's
I mean, I could go further, but I
No,
don't
no,
want
that's very helpful. I was just trying to
Yeah.
understand if there was a opportunity for balance.
I'm okay for now.
So I did have one other question that was a follow-up on City Councilman Weaver's question that was raised and then overshadowed by the rest of the conversation. He asked the question about community business zone versus mixed-use business or commercial business. And in all of these options, except option 1, I believe that what is currently community business is gone, that whatever that zone, that density is, and it's replaced with mixed-use business, MUB. And I'm curious if you could talk a bit about what the implications of that would be in terms of the existing neighborhood center, the existing community plaza and ideal market area, which is part of what the neighborhood is so focused on as part of the vibrancy.
I will provide an initial answer to that, but I would invite either Jean or my colleague Kalani to speak to that issue as well. I believe the shift from community business to mixed-use business is largely because of essentially the use tables associated with the types of uses that can be accommodated in those two categories. The mixed-use business provides a little bit of a wider range, I believe, including some residential uses that may be more challenging within the mixed-use business, and therefore, if a goal of the area were to, or if a goal of the area plan were to at least enable the creation of housing in order to meet our housing goals, it would facilitate that. I think that's the basic rationale behind that shift that you see. It is not, of course, meant to incentivize the removal of any of the very cherished assets. And that's why the preservation of historic assets is featured within our goals for the project. So it, of course, is not meant to suggest that, Community Plaza or Ideal Market it's not meant to incentivize anything happening to those that would result in their removal or anything to their detriment.
And I think that we can emphasize that as well. This is our opportunity within this area plan as part of the vision for this area is to emphasize the vibrant nature of those and the function and need for those commercial uses.
Lupita, you had a question too.
Yeah. Yes. I'm just wondering, going back to the whole idea of affordability, and if you can help us a little bit, remind us if we have a target for the city of, affordable housing, and how much would this particular, let's say we're looking at a range of, options that will contribute at various levels. Just to give me an idea that will get us closer to 2%, 10% to that goal that we want, anywhere near?
Ask Michelle again to address the.
I think Michelle Allen is probably best qualified amongst us to address what the overall city goals is and how this might at least make a dent in that.
So, Michelle Allen, Housing and Human Services. So the council recently adopted a new goal for the city. It used to be a 10% goal. Now it's a 15% goal. It includes a mix of housing affordability, some for low, moderate, lower income folks, some for middle income. And so anytime that we do a project that exceeds 15%, we're getting ahead. I think that's the best way to think about it.
Can I just follow up on that? I really appreciated you explaining how much the city can play a role in the outcomes on the site. So would that include being able to set some goals for both low-income and middle-income housing?
It would. Again, it's sort of a big package. There are more funds available for low, moderate income housing than there are for middle-income housing. So that's tougher to do middle-income housing. We usually like to basically get that through inclusionary housing. So let's say we sold off a portion of the site for sale housing, we would probably want that buyer to put some middle-income housing in that project.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and just also, Lupita, we had a presentation where we voted to recommend to council that they adopt the 15% goal. And with the, correct me, Michelle, if I've got it wrong, but it was just a hair over 4,000 housing units need to be permanently deed restricted affordable between now and 2035 was the year that, was it 35?
That sounds right. It's a moving goal. It's 15% of whatever the housing stock is in any given year. So it's kind of, we're chasing it.
Yeah, so if we get, I was just trying, I thought you wanted, I could see you wanted something more. So,
He knows, I think he's gotten my way.
Yeah, we're at like,
100 or 200 units of affordable housing, and you're making a pretty good dent in the 4,000 that we need to get in the next 18 years.
Yeah, so that's kind of like,
I believe for 15% for that goal, we're pushing 8% right now that we have in our inventory. Yeah.
Are there questions that people need to ask before we move on? John, say hi once more.
One of the considerations that went into the purchase of this property by the city, and there was a lot of discussion about it, was the possibility of locating city offices and county office, co-locating those offices in this area. And it seems to me that in these options that has been de-emphasized, except for the number 5 to some extent. And I wonder if my perception is incorrect, or if you can describe how that's been going on.
So I can say that each of the options and the way that we're proceeding forward at this point is with the assumption that the medical pavilion would be renovated for a city service hub. While that decision specifically will be, the council and will be addressing that later this summer with the facilities master plan, and I think that's what we're talking about with some of the schedule, is to ensure that that discussion takes place to inform the area plan piece of this too. So we are still thinking about that for city services, and the option 5 is the one that includes the potential for county. There wouldn't be space in any of the other options for that county co-location. It is not the intention to de-emphasize that at this point, the relocation.
And I'll point out, just for full disclosure, that all the options also acknowledge the fact that we already, the Brenton building, which is located on the south side of Alpine Street, just a short ways off of Broadway, is also owned by the city and has been renovated. And I think that provides about 25,000 square feet of space for city services. And of course, city staff is currently located and working in that building.
So just to follow up, so does that mean that if the county were not to locate there, that between the Brenton building and the Pavilion building, would that suffice for the city's needs?
I'll just sort of, first of all, I'll just sort of get a sense for those who want to think this way in terms of the magnitude. As I said, the Brenton building is about 25,000 square feet. The medical pavilion, I believe, is currently about 65,000 square feet. If we were to add a 4th story to it, that would get us up to, I think, 85 to 90,000 square feet. So between the two of those, we'd have about 115,000 square feet that could be devoted to providing city services. That would, while that would not empty out every other sort of satellite area where the city has offices, it would at least accommodate what have been identified as sort of the high priority areas. As I think we've talked about probably before with you, the two buildings directly across the creek from where we're sitting right now, the Park Central building and the New Britain building, are located in the high hazard flood zone And we've determined that the city needs to vacate those buildings actually within the next handful of years. Because of the restrictions associated with being located in the high hazard zone, we're actually facing, that puts a dollar cap on how much you can spend on either one of those buildings in a rolling 12-month period, such that literally if the heating and cooling system, I think, of the Park Central building were to go out, we would actually be prevented under our own rules, which we abide by, from fixing that. So the 115,000 square feet that I've referred to would essentially create enough space to, per the current plans, vacate the Park Central and New Britain building, as well as move the city out to the space that it currently leases at the center, on Center Green, where we have several city departments. And I think we also have some staff in the atrium building over in the east bookend, and it would allow that to be vacated. So it by no means empties out all of the city's satellite offices, but it would enable the relocation of the ones that have been most critically identified for potential consolidation.
So just to clarify, so under all the options that are described here, that space would be available for the city
It could
offices?
be available if ultimately the decision were made to devote the medical pavilion, to renovate it, to add a story, and to devote that to city services. Yes.
Thanks.
I just wanted to get clear. Center Green is the one that's way out north on 55th Street where Parks and...
It's just off of Valmont, just west of Foothills. It's where the Human Resources Department is, our Information Technology Department is. There may be, I can't think.
Yeah, there's it's Center Green Drive, so just north off Valmont.
Yeah.
Just this side of Foothills.
Where's open space?
They are out. They're out right off of 55th.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
They just moved into what they call their hub there, and I think the current plan is that they will remain at that location for a while. So it would not.
Not looking to consolidate.
This would not contemplate moving them out of the space that they recently moved in.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Okay, other questions before we get to the questions that were actually being asked?
Yeah, just for clarification. Well, it's helpful to get clarification, so I appreciate you giving us the time for this.
Good.
This is actually following up on the question of city and county. One of the discussions at City Council on Tuesday had to do with the county's needs and the express need for more parking. I was just wondering if anyone has evaluated whether the existing county parking facility at, I think it's Portland and 13th, could adequately meet the needs that they've expressed rather than giving over some of this land potentially to building a parking structure.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of the further assessment about how that might be accommodated. We haven't really broached that yet.
Brian, I'm done.
Great. Appreciate your humor. John? John's not done, though. John's got more.
No.
What you got, John?
Count the girls still out.
Yeah, I can't resist asking about the recommendation about the flood management.
Should we perhaps talk about that under item 4, flood management? Is that possible?
Beg pardon?
It's item 4 under flood management. Should we maybe just talk about that when we get to it?
Well,
is that fair?
Talk, as long as we get the chance then, that's fine.
We're just, the only thing that's keeping us back is this question.
It's fear itself.
Okay, well, no, I'm happy to talk about it then.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your willingness to do that. So I guess the first question for us is, are we in agreement with the revised area plan goals and objectives? And I believe we, weighed in on these at least twice before. And so I just want to see, I guess, instead of taking them individually, does anyone have anything they want to kind of add or have concerns with existing language in this part? Anyone? Or generally, it stayed pretty consistent from what we've seen before, so.
Yeah, it was really just, I think
checking in
we
again.
Talked about all the pieces that were included in the objectives in some form or fashion along the way, but we just put them into objectives for this process at this
So I'm a little late to the party.
Sure.
Because this has been going on long before I got here.
It's a long process, yeah, sorry.
I do have questions about the use of this land for centralized local government, for centralizing government offices. And I'll just leave it at that, and I think we'll be able to talk about it more in other.
And if I can just circle back on that. That was part of the vision plan. It's definitely part of the purpose of purchasing the property, and so that's why that's there. If that direction changes, the direction of the area plan changes.
Yeah,
And I'll just, if I could, I apologize, Gene, but I'll just emphasize what Gene said a few minutes ago, which is that that city staff is also actively working on the city facilities master plan. And that will really address some key questions like what is the most prudent way to provide city services to our community? To what extent does consolidation make sense? Where should those places be located, and so forth? So this is not an issue that's been settled and set aside. It's very much a live issue, and we will be coming back, we city staff, I'm using the royal we, coming back to council in late August to visit on exactly the city facilities master plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to, on the record, totally agree with you on that. I've thrown a number of stones at that idea over the years, and appreciate you guys for being nice to me after all that. The other comments I had, I just want to, I'll use John's terminology, I want to embroider a little bit on 4 and 5. I mean, one is I really do think that we have to take a close look at what that centralized local government customer service hub is, both in terms of its ability to generate community around those services. That's a story that might not be part of it. I mean, if people are thinking like, oh, we're going to get an office building, so what? But I think it's important to sort of tell the story that it could actually be a key pivotal shift in how we do community engagement. So that's an important part. And then under the housing item, I think it's implied there that it's on-site, but I think it's pretty clear. So I just want to say it again. Does anyone else have other goals and objectives kind of comments to make? John?
Well, we'll get back to it, but I see the flood mitigation element there in number 8, and I'm beginning to get nervous about how we're meeting that, but we'll talk about that later.
Got a quick one.
Thanks. Yeah, Peter.
The city's acting as a developer here as of now, and so what I think needs to be here is an actual, at least some reference to the financial viability of a plan, having the entire community list out their Christmas list and then saying, actually, it's spray painted rocks, because that's all we have, is not a good way to build trust. Because if we're not going to build whatever comes out unless we can afford it. So we should work backwards a bit and at least have some reference to financial viability, or at least creation of some more transparency into a pro forma, which would help a lot of people understand what's going on here. Because in the absence of those hard numbers that at the end of the day will make the decision, yet we're not talking about them or referencing them on the goals and objectives.
I would certainly second that. Other thoughts on this? Lupita?
I was just wondering, as I was looking at the goals, I was thinking, we don't have a single number in there. And so it's kind of, it would be helpful at least in terms of, targets in some way, or ranges or something.
Yeah, costing, I think that was brought up earlier, and I think that's valid.
I think, yeah, that will be something that will help us as well as the community to know that we are being judicious about the decision making. I'm sure it's happening, it's just not being, it's not coming forward.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Everybody should see.
Sure, it's happening. Yeah.
And I really appreciate you guys doing the deep dive with City Council recently on the financial underpinnings of the project. That was, I think, really important to cover for those same reasons.
So just a question about how we're organizing. Is this the time when we can talk about our public process, or are we going to have that as an explicit topic later on?
That's 3C under the agenda.
Okay. All right, I'll wait for that.
Yeah.
So, Brian, may I?
Yeah, please.
I just want to follow up with what you talked about number 4, the local government services and the creating of a hub. First of all, I think all the goals and the clarifying objectives are good. I can't find one that's objectionable. But the idea that Brian had prefaced by him saying he'd thrown stones at this idea in the past of having a local government services hub there, I think is good. I think one of the clarifying objectives that we might think of adding is to better describe why it would be important to have a local government services hub there. I think we talked a lot about this the last time you came in front of us, about having a variety of different uses, residential, commercial, entertainment, food and beverage, to keep this neighborhood alive 18, 20 hours a day. And to make it really vibrant. And so having people who come to work at 8 and leave at 5 and eat lunch, that's a component of that. But also, the notion that our government employees are having a variety of difficulties living in the community they're serving, and I don't think that creates the best level of service. I think talking about how, people who are a member of the community that they serve, are more likely to, I don't know how you say this without making it sound like we're not doing the best we can, but it's true when we look at, universities that have brought their faculty closer into the neighborhoods, university faculties that find a space in the neighborhood around the university rather than, living way out in the suburbs and commuting in. These are faculty members who are willing to stay for a late faculty meeting or meet with a student for coffee. And so I think we can find some diplomatic way of painting that picture around why we want a government services hub in the community and why we want to focus some of the affordable housing on our own. And, I would not be opposed to even having criteria-based selection for the recipients of the affordable housing that would favor, local employees and government employees, if that's something that, we can wrap our legal heads around.
I would love to see a City of Boulder housing needs assessment.
As long as we're getting as specific as you just got, if we're going to get the 17 acres at Iris and Broadway, my support for government buildings there at Alpine Balsam would change. Because that's additional housing development.
Yeah, I think it's good for us to acknowledge that it's tricky for us to try to look at that.
Yeah.
If there's a integration of that into our decision-making process, how do you tie that into an area planning process? And that might be above our pay grade. That's probably City Council kind of a deal, but I don't know. So any other thoughts on the area plan goals and objectives?
Ready to move on.
Great, cool. So the next item on our list is, are the draft area plan components and options ready for public review and input? And I think really we should focus on the kind of 2 sub-questions they've given us. Should anything be limited or anything be added? I feel like at this, and I'm just going to weigh in sort of initially, so I'll call myself, I feel like at this juncture, I could spend a lot of time thinking about design, urban design, programming, a lot of things that would go along with this, but I think that these personally are far enough along that any further investment in that kind of thinking from our side of the dais is probably premature. I think it's really important for us to get these things out in front of folks so they can respond to them and we can hear what people have to say. And then just setting the context, I mean, City Council essentially has already asked for option 1 to be eliminated. So I just want to do a quick straw poll. Is everyone comfortable with going along with that decision, or are we going to try to be at odds with that? So sort of like, is it okay to do a thumbs up on that? Are we okay rolling with the City Council's direction?
As long as we get the opportunity to make some recommendations for another option to explore.
Certainly, yeah, certainly.
To make sure it wasn't.
Yeah, no, I don't want to put the lid on any other discussion for sure. So I think, that's sort of a general consensus here is that we've got agreement with City Council that option 1 as it is in this set of diagrams can be eliminated. That doesn't shut the door on any other options being considered too. So I just want to open up to everybody else to sort of like, since I've made myself heard, who wants to go next? And should we maybe just go down the line? We'd start with Peter, putting you on the spot. And you can also say you don't want to do it.
Of 1?
No, we've already decided that, essentially, like, should any new options be added, or do we need to do things to existing options to make them more useful in the public engagement process?
I'm still turning over a few ideas in my head. I'd like to pass.
Okay, fair. Sarah?
It's so grown up of you. I'm not going to pass. So, although I'm very comfortable with eliminating option 1, I would like an option that includes some sort of community business component, which it disappears in all of the other options. And I was struck, I spent a lot of time trying to understand what was underneath the pictures that you all offered, and I was struck by the fact that between the 5 options, there is not an option that includes per acre density of between 10 and 30. You have 10 and below, and then 30 to 60, 30 to 90, and 60 to 90. And nothing that's sort of a slightly higher density than Holiday. And I think it would be very interesting to hear from you all what an option might look like that in the hospital site has Holiday or slightly more densification, and I'm probably using the wrong language, but scale and height and style, and which could feel very much like a neighborhood and have that urban density without having the super high density that are in options 3, 4, and 5, which frankly, from my understanding, look a lot like transit village densities, and I don't know that that's something that's appropriate to the neighborhood, given the Boulder Valley Comp Plan commitment to neighborhood character and et cetera.
Sarah, can I ask, help clarify a little bit more about what you mean by the community business component?
So it's related to the question I asked before, and I might be misunderstanding these diagrams, so I apologize, but only diagram 1 maintains what is currently, I think, zoned community business, which in option 1 is this sort of red space. And every other one goes to mixed-use business, which, based on the drawings in attachment C, could be has a FAR of up to 2.5, 4 stories of up to 55 feet. Single-use buildings are a mix of commercial, residential, and/or public uses. And all the pictures, and I really do appreciate you offering pictures, are very high density and very urban. And I realize the hospital is also high density and urban, but the entire site and that whole area is not. And it just seems to me like that is a imposition of a level of density that we might want to back off a bit. So finding an option that would have maintain more of what we are currently calling community business, and a lower density in the mixed-use business, maybe 3 stories, or at some point 4 stories, but not on the entire. I don't know exactly the language to use, but.
Yeah, I think one thing that this is a really wonky set of diagrams, and so I know baked into the community business zone, there's all kinds of weird stuff that makes it actually kind of problematic for this sort of thing. So it might be important to sort of tell that story if it's going to be part of this story. But I actually, excuse me to editorialize just a little bit more, I think the people are not going to respond well to zoning maps. So, even those of us who've been doing this for a while look at that and sometimes don't know what they all mean. And I think, Sarah's reaction to the images is much like mine. I think you can tell the story much more effectively with 50 images on a sheet and talk about the character of the place, and then actually get far more specific about what it is, so that either people have just so people have good expectations, and as opposed to either fears or optimism on either side. Just because I think clarity is super important. Sorry, I didn't mean to like jump in, but.
No, that's perfect. Yes, thank you.
Okay, then I'll go. And I'm going to preface my comment with a question. Is there any notion that maybe this would be a good place to try form-based code part 2 after the area planning process is complete?
I think we've batted around the idea of that or design guidelines or something, but we
Okay.
need to figure out what that is when we actually get to implementation,
Okay,
like what's
great.
the best tool.
Okay, then I'm just going to make a quick comment, which is, so should any new options be added? I said this at the last meeting, I'll just repeat it. I'm less impressed with the idea of having a giant governmental complex with both the county and the city than I am with the idea of consolidating city offices in this area. And, you know, the county's office space needs and parking needs are so significant that I think if you add the county and the city's needs together, it starts tipping the balance away from that vibrant, round-the-clock community that I am envisioning for this area. And so I would argue for, if we're going to have a new option, some sort of hybrid between 4 and 5 that essentially doesn't consider the county's needs and replaces them either with further consolidation of city offices or with housing that fills in, or retail or mixed use that fills in the area that was dedicated to the county.
I think that's probably option 4. I mean, option 4 and the others
Yeah.
really just focus on the city.
Okay, well, if you think you can accommodate that sort of X the county and focus the open air, the opened up space into other uses with just using 4, then I have no new options to add.
Says the attorney who deals with the county.
Well, I mean, they've got nice digs.
Exactly.
I don't need to ours.
Cool. Well, I'll call myself then. I don't think we need to add any more options personally. I do think that we need to inject some personality into the options, though, and I kind of said that before, but I think some of the things that should go into there is, I'm going to kind of go back to this when we get to the more appropriate sections, but what's in it for the neighbors, you know, is a big question. And if we need to community engagement, which I'll talk about in a second, if we ask them what they need that they don't currently have, and then we say we can include that, that's going to be, I think, a reasonable approach. That's all I was going to say. Lupita.
I think my comment is going to go following what Harmon was talking about. I really like the idea of somehow envisioning this particular site as having a high goal to bring our workers here, especially of our underserved communities. We do have plenty of them, and they are on the outskirts. We've seen the maps. There's specks around the city, and they're very discernible. It would be great if we start getting a little bit more of the mix, and then we can truly reflect the values we speak of. So I think this will be an excellent opportunity. Also, it would be great for us to be able to maybe have dinner with our, gardener, or, the person that just happens to live across the street from us and also serves in some other capacity. That really builds community. And I think I'm hoping that this will be a good way to really start building that.
You're here. John?
Well, I don't disagree with anything that I've heard from my colleagues here, but I have a couple thoughts. One is that I am a much bigger fan of having county and city offices be co-located to the degree possible, because I think there are so many benefits associated with a close coordination, both for the public when they have to visit offices in both units, as well as for the staff who are concerned with similar issues. In distinction, to distinguish my thoughts from Harmon's, I would encourage that to the degree possible. Also because of the potential for potentially be associated with county move to that location. The other thing that I would encourage is as I think Beth Hondorf pointed out, we need a bike path along Broadway in front of there, and I haven't seen that pointed out in the maps, but it's never too early to think about details like that. And otherwise, I think in the city council meeting that you had a couple nights ago, there was a proposal to use some sort of a form-based decision-making or design codes. And I think that could go a long way to making things more clear for the neighborhood about what the impacts on them might be, rather than talking about densities, which tend to scare people immediately. If people understood what the nature of the buildings were going to be without reference to the densities associated with them, I think that could be another way of talking about this that might have some benefit.
Great. David.
Okay. Well, the first one I wanted to bring up, first of all, I think all options 2 through 5 should remain in the mix for the next phases. I think they're all valid options to look at. What I heard, I also watched City Council, and there was a lot of confusion between 2 and 4 being almost equivalent. And I felt like the outcome of that discussion was that, yeah, they are almost equivalent, which made me feel like perhaps they can be differentiated a bit, so that we are looking at 2 different things that resonate with people more. It doesn't really strike me that you're going to add a lot of extra mixed use if the number of houses that we project remain the same. So maybe there's more density in option 4, or maybe there's an opportunity for what Sarah said, to keep the commercial business in area 1 in some areas in option 2, or something like that. So it just seemed to me that there might be some fine tuning to make those pop a little bit more into things that the community might be able to weigh in on better. And then what people have said about the visuals, I think, could help with that too. And you did present that, but having visuals accompany these might actually make it pretty clear that you're talking about more neighborhood-serving businesses on the first floor. And people, I don't know what people will think. It could be that having a lot of businesses across Broadway and along Broadway, maybe that won't be as big a priority, but having those differentiate better would make sense to me. I did want to say that with option 3, I was kind of alarmed and disappointed that almost half the city council members were willing to take that off the table at this point. I think that's really not a good idea. I think I'd like to see what the community thinks about option 3, and I think option 3 is a huge option in realizing the Boulder Valley Comp Plan goals and principles. So I think that option 1, you can justify removing it because it doesn't really help us meet those principles, but option 3 does. And so I see no reason at this time to just preemptively get rid of it. So I did want to make that point. On option 5, it does bother me a bit that it seems like with Boulder residents, it's going to have a poison pill on it, because people aren't going to be willing to do a trade-off to do that huge precipitous drop in projected housing just to accommodate county services being located there without something else going on. So I worry that that's got a poison pill in it. And I think that it's a shame, and we probably can't, but if we could somehow coordinate it with the Iris and Broadway area and what we might be able to get from that, but I realize that's a heavy lift. But I've heard other people say that. So if we could know that, okay, that drop in the housing projections from co-locating, because I love the idea too of collating. Like John said, collating county and city services, great idea, but we have to know that we're not going to give up that much housing opportunity, I think, to do that, or at least that would be what I would expect a lot of people to react to. So to make that option viable, there may be some ways to do that. But I don't know if we can talk, if anybody wants to say whether there is any ability to tie in, the fact that the county's leaving that area at Iris or not. Has there been discussion on that?
I think that we heard that from council too.
Mm-hmm.
It has to, there has to be some linkage.
Yeah.
What we might get.
Yeah, so.
I can just interject. Boulder city residents are also Boulder County residents, so it's not us versus them.
Oh, and I don't mean that. I just mean the giving up that housing, I think, is going to not appeal to, because I actually like I say, I want to make it clear that I really like the idea of co-locating and to have having a lot of that there. I guess that's it.
Okay, great. So let's jump to the question number 3, which is, does planning board have questions about the following draft area plan components? So the first one of these is land use character district and urban design options. The next one will be the connections plan, access and mobility strategy, and the last one is community engagement. So let's take those in order. So the first one being land use character district and urban design options. And I'm going to point to you, Sarah. Peter, did you get to say what you wanted to say last time? I'm sorry.
I actually decided that I wasn't going to add any.
Okay, cool. You win the brevity award. So Sarah, you get to kick this one off, and I'll keep stepping us down the road as we go through these questions.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up something, and you tell me if this is the appropriate place or not.
I feel like some wrist slapping Annie or something. I'm sorry.
No. So I had a lot of questions about the potential interplay of the various options and the proposed changes in the use tables. And this may or may not be the right place. I mean, I'm sure it's not the right place to explore that, but I certainly want to put it on the table. And the example that came to my mind was the use table change allowing efficiencies in almost every zoning district, and my recollection is there wasn't a minimum or a maximum, or there wasn't a maximum related to the proposed change. So for me, the question to put into this process is, how would the use table changes intersect with what's being proposed here?
Yeah, I think, just in that bucket, just since you asked me to tell you whether I was going to sort of smack you with a ruler or not. I do think that that's an appropriate thing in this conversation. Land use is a piece of this. I think the conversation today is less about exactly what would happen and what the outcomes might be, but more sort of like inputting that to city staff, like your question says, and how do we want to make sure, to rephrase that, we want to make sure that this is a process that's dovetailed with the use tables process and with special attention to how it relates to efficiencies.
Thank you.
Do you have other things you want to?
No, that was actually it.
Cool, thank you.
Good question.
Going down
Yes,
the line. Okay,
sorry, go ahead,
for land use, I think that's really tied into the options that we just discussed. So good options. I think in terms of character districts and urban design, I like the alley connections, the vulnerves, those kind of greenways, the ever developing concepts on how to handle Goose Creek. We've talked down to the gnats posterior around that, talking about how if it's on one side of the buildings, it might get too icy and stuff versus if it's on the south side of the building. So I think that's still got there's probably a lot of work that's left to do as we get a little closer to final design, but I think we're all on the right track with that, so I'll leave it at that.
Cool, right on. So I'll call myself, I think in terms of land use tables, I'll second what Sarah said about making sure we're integrating this process with land use table process as well. I think there's some things to learn from this process that would feed back into the use table process really, really beautifully. So I think that's super important. I also think it's super important to talk about what kinds of land uses are allowed in this so that people understand that as a part of the community engagement process. Like, what can go in these spaces? Everybody knows what's there now, but they don't necessarily know what is possible. The character districts, I think it's a reasonable framework for understanding it and for breaking it down, and I am assuming that that's going to sort of map relatively directly to zoning districts once that happens, and it seems to have happened in this set of drawings. But I think every time, I'm going to throw some more stones, every time someone does a project, the edge of the project that they're looking at is looked at as a gateway. And that doesn't mean it's a gateway to anything other than to your project. So there is no North Gateway and there is no South Gateway. As you're on the bus going up and down Broadway, you don't hit those points and go, oh, that was a gateway. Oh, I've left the neighborhood, now it's like I'm un-gatewaying. Oh, I'm now in a different neighborhood, I'm re-gatewaying. It's not an experience that people have. And I think it also sets up, a poor way of us looking at corridor planning. Because really, if we're trying to do transit-rich corridors, they need to be continuously transit-rich, not just sporadically transit-rich. And that's one of the problems we faced as we talked about the Broadway corridor plan workshop that we did a while back. That I think was really, really well done. It was super great. But I think this needs to inform that rather than sort of just shrugging at the edge and being like, we're not going to, I don't know what goes on over there. It's a transition to what's not happening. So I want to throw stones at the terminology of gateways. I think transition is fine, but I wouldn't call them gateways. That's my little speech about gateways. And in terms of urban design options, I think, again, just making those as robust as possible. And I think making it clear that as you have started to, that you can start to preference different roof forms. You can start to preference varied roof heights. You can start to preference some of that sort of stuff. And how and where you allocate uses on the site is a part of that, I think, as opposed to the old use table approach, which is anywhere is the same as anywhere else, which is not true. So those are only kind of as brief as I could make them, comments/rants. Lupita.
Mine are going to be very brief. After listening to our community members, I would really like to see if even in new iterations on land use, we start speaking a little bit more of the language that the community brought up. I really appreciate, for example, reminding us about bike paths, but somehow didn't come through in some of this. So I think that our community has some thoughtful activities. I mean, there's a comprehensive survey that was done, and so there may be some kernels of wisdom in there that maybe we may not have used properly just yet. So I will encourage that in the future we maybe use the language so that we can start speaking more directly with each other, because I was listening as much as I could and see if we were coming from the same place, and I think that the goal should be that we all end up in the same place. And so I think some of it will be homogenizing our language so that we understand each other, and so that at the end we all want what is best for the city. So I think that's really got my goal. I'm really excited to see this community really make Boulder what it should be.
Cool, right on. John.
Well, I'll go through the three dots.
The first of the three dots, so land use, character district, and urban design options.
Okay, I get a chance later on.
Yeah, we're all going to go through them one at a time, so
all right.
Just on the first bullet point right now.
All right, I think that the way you've handled it is nice. I still think that, as commented previously, that some sort of a form-based description of the buildings, either in addition to or instead of talking about density, would go a long way to making this a smoother operation.
Great, thanks, John. David?
Great. Well, I'll just keep piling on to that comment because I agree. I think that, it's not going to be form-based code and there won't be as prescriptive as Boulder Junction, but the area plan does give us the opportunity to put in things that we can have specific guidelines that then we can say, hey, that doesn't look right for what we envision for this area. the area plan says it should do this. So if we can find ways to describe what we're looking for aesthetically, that would be wonderful. And I heard Brian say things like that, Lupita, so everybody's been striking that theme. Also, the city council had a lot of desire to see visuals. And I think that's how you get around some of the land use stuff that people who aren't familiar with zoning and land use may have trouble understanding. So visuals would be really great as we go forward. Let's see. I think that's good.
Cool. Peter?
So I'm not usually one to cite the packet, but is attachment C not the visuals you're looking for, or is it that you're looking to see more of that spread throughout the process?
Oh, yeah, I'm thinking actually maybe showing examples of what things would look like along Broadway, not just example architectures, but what are we thinking, how this might lay out if we went with this option?
So experience maps and representative sketches and renderings and perspectives.
Yeah, stuff like that might be useful.
Along those lines, I do like the images in attachment C, and I really do like seeing the images around the linear park and the plazas and public gathering spaces, because I do think that is what this will be known for. The buildings, I'm sure we're going to do our best to make them look horrible and designed by committee, and it is what it is. We're going to try our best, but to fail at the plazas in the public realm would really be sad, because that's where people will actually come together as a community. And so I think showcasing what that will be as an amenity for not only the immediate neighbors, but the whole city, and really using that representative imagery and that kind of the tonality of the space and the different, the moments that you have in this environment and the kind of the choreography is something lyrical that can be brought out more than it is. So I do echo the imagery, but making this more user-friendly and thinking of it that way as a developer who's trying to convince the city to allow their project. So put yourself in the shoes and make it look like we get presented at our best projects, because they put a lot of effort into that. Not that you're not, but you have two hats on, and it is hard sometimes to do it that way.
Harmon, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I wasn't going to add, but if I can, just in reaction to what Peter just said, if this is a great government complex and a great new area for the city, one thing that cities often look back on and look forward with is, well, we got this park designed by Frederick Law Olmsted or something like that. Has there been any thought about public design being subject to a competition and potentially having something really spectacular proposed by 15 different outside firms and a big selection process and sort of.
I think,
or maybe an inside
we'll
firm.
Probably get into during the implementation where we're not at a point where we're sort of designing the process by which individual components will be delivered. So,
okay.
No, but that is not, I do want to add on to that, because that isn't necessarily an individual component. That's the very narrative that's going to attract the community and the stakeholders to the project. Right now, there is no element that is binding anyone together, because there is no big idea or dream or vision. And saying that we're going to have a design competition doesn't mean we're going to lay out the rules. It just says that's where we're going. We're going somewhere exceptional. And if we start layering more of that language in, I think we're going to get more buy-in.
I'm going to chime in on the two that can't resist. But I do think that this is a chance to do something great. And, we'll see if, 30th and Pearl ends up being that or not, and how those form-based code requirements and city efforts pan out in terms of like the experience of the community, whether people feel like it's a place they love. But this definitely should be a place that people love. and it should be a place that the neighbors love and the place that the residents love and the visitors love. So that should be a really uniting theme of land use characteristics, urban design options. Harmon, do you want to kick us off on connections plan and access and mobility strategy?
Yeah, and slightly snarkily, I might say, Brian, that seemed to have misinterpreted the question, which was, does planning board have questions about the following draft area plan components? And we just gave 15, 20, 30 minutes of comments about the first one. So do we want to change up how we're dealing with this? Or I've got some comments that I can briefly go through, and what would you like?
I think your suggestion's just fine.
To go with questions?
Yeah, go with questions.
Just pose your comment as a question.
Yeah, right. You just turn that around.
Lift your voice at the end.
Just upspeak, planning board upspeak.
Like my third grade planning board impression. Okay, so anyway, in terms of the connections plan, I guess my only question, which is kind of in the form of a comment, is that I'm not so sure that we can't break up the blocks with more additional north-south multimodal, including car connections. And I don't know if I'm really into some of these new streets that, make dog legs or actually make an L and don't go through in a conventional way. As far as the rest of this stuff, and I will make just a little comment, because I think planning board should let staff know to some extent how we feel about this. Yeah, I like a lot of almost all the things in the connections plan, the commitment to greenhouse gas reduction, the sump parking, the commitment to, or at least waving the hat at Vision Zero safety, transit, the bus super stops on Broadway, and being able to show that there's a lot less impact in terms of traffic than there was when the hospital was fully operational. And not just that this new plan and all of its different options has a lot less impact, but that the transportation plan for Alpine Balsam is full of much smarter TDM and strategies for multimodal use.
Cool. I would second all that, and I would just say that during the process, it would be good to have an image for the public and other folks to feedback, to understand the context of the connections master plan, transportation master plan, because I think I would love to see a bike lane along Broadway, but there are bike lanes block off Broadway their way, and if we added a bike lane here, it would be like 1 block long and not connect to any other bike lanes, which is a pretty weird thing to do. So it's got to be in a bigger context. So we might get comments like that I'm like, yeah, bike lanes, I'm totally all for it. But actually, it's a kind of a weird way to do that, because nobody wants a 1 block long or 2 block long bike lane. So I'll pass it along.
That makes sense. We should not state the
Trying.
obvious. Well, that's okay. But I think it's important. No, I don't. I think I'll pass on this one.
Okay, cool. John?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I agree with what's been said.
David?
I guess in the form of a question, I agree with pretty much everything in there. I asked myself, I know that of a number of people whose pattern with bicycles through this area is kind of from 13th Street up to North Boulder Park or into Newlands or into Wonderland. And what you end up doing is cutting through parking lots and going through alleys and this and that. So I think that I love that there are more connections. I wonder if those connections can kind of facilitate where we think the most traffic will go, which might be from southeast to northwest and reverse, because that just seems to be a pattern that people do a lot. I had a point on that as well, but I guess I lost it. So maybe I'll be able to think of it later.
You can always circle back through if you want to. Peter?
I think I'll spare you all my wisdom on this one. I have nothing to add to these great comments.
Cool.
Again,
Sarah?
I'm not sure this is the right place, but I'm going to bring up my graded tree issue again. And I'm hopeful that when you do the green streets or greenways, that instead of having enclosed urban trees, these are trees that have room to grow and flourish and become part of the canopy. Not that it has to do with transit exactly, but I just wanted to say that.
Curbside management.
I think that's the right bucket to fit that into, so appreciate it. Harmon, did you have anything else on that one?
None.
Okay. I just want to take one last loop through it, which is just that, and this is part of kicking off the community engagement piece, last bullet, which I'll start off. I think it's really important to do some mapping exercises with the people who live in the neighborhood and to understand where their weak points are in terms of circulation, like how you get from the neighborhoods up to the site. I know you guys, go for it.
That's actually what we did.
Okay, cool.
At the small group workshops. We had the maps out and we had trace and we gave people markers and they marked up where were the pinch points and where were opportunities and what they liked. So all of that information was super helpful and we got really specific about all of that. And that fed into what you're seeing in the connections plan.
Awesome, great, good
fun.
work. And I mean, that's one thing that people are really good at responding to, like where does it stink to cross the road and where did I almost get hit when I was on my bike and where does my child get afraid when they're trying to get over to the school? Those like really key experiential parts of the city are important to map. So thank you for doing that, that's awesome. And then on the engagement plan, I think there's also one of the big questions is essentially the wider context for the use tables project, which is like, okay, so you live in this neighborhood, what are the things that you have to get in your car to do? What gets you in your car to go somewhere else? And can we find a way of providing those kinds of uses on site so you don't have to get in your car to do those things, whether it's like getting to a preschool or getting to a daycare or getting to whatever. I mean, we're not gonna be able to fit, a Sam's Club in there or something like that, but I think there are some things that if you inventory what's there and then look at the community around and ask them what they need, there's a good possibility we'll be able to provide at least the shells for those sorts of things to be present. And then I think in the terms of like the last piece for me on the community engagement plan, because I know everybody else have really good comments on this too, it's so important to listen to people who are speaking and to hear what they have to say. It's also super important to figure out who's not being heard and who's in this neighborhood, who's silent, who can't show up at a meeting and sit here for a long time, and just really find a way of talking to them, whether it's, Boulder Housing Partners owns a senior housing project in the property. You can go to them and talk to them. There's affordable housing around the North Boulder Rec Center. You can go use their space because there's a space there to meet. Bringing people who don't live in those communities into those communities to meet can be a really great way of creating community and creating some cross-pollination and understanding between people. Because, at its highest and best, like, I think these processes can be viewed straightforwardly as a community building process. How do we have people come into these spaces, in these conversations, and walk out with more affinity for each other rather than thinking like, wow, I didn't know that guy before, but now I really hate him, which seems to happen sometimes here. So let's see if we can like somehow undo that pattern. Lupita?
I really like how you pronounce my name. I think that just closing with that, I would like to find ways so that we can hear from the workers in our city, especially those that are not here. I suggest, I don't know, they may require special ways. I don't know if you've been successful in the past, but I suspect it's probably one of the hardest things to do. So, I mean, I'm happy to try to think about ways, but certainly I know when you want to access communities that you don't see regularly, sometimes you really have to think outside the box and do somewhat unorthodox things. But I figure out, at least for some communities, where to find people when I really want them. So I don't know so much how easy that is for the workers that come from the outside. We do have, I believe, 60,000 of them, so we should be able to find some of them. I would like to find a good number of them at once so that it's not so, so painful and hard. And, I'll be happy to kind of brainstorm with you because I really think that will be a beautiful thing to do to show that our city really does care and that we are really doing things differently now. Thank you.
Could I just mention, we did do the 2014 in-commuter survey, which does capture a lot of the needs and interests and desires of in-commuters of all types. So it may be time to to go back out into the field. It has been a number of years, but that does exist.
John?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think you've been doing a beautiful job on community engagement. I do have a couple suggestions, though. One is, and these are points that were raised in the public comments also, that I think are quite valid. One is to somehow systematically review the input that you're getting at these various meetings, both from the neighborhood and elsewhere, so that it's presented in a way that the people who made those comments realize that their comments are being properly considered and included.
Yep.
And typically, at least in my experience, when we hear about it, staff sort of sums up some of the comments, and that's the end of it. And so you don't know if that was 99% of the neighborhood who made that comment, or 51%, or 2%. And I'm not sure how to go about quantifying it. It's a huge and labor-intensive thing to do. But if there was some way for people, both for us to know what sort of percentages we're talking about, and for the people who made those comments to realize that they're not alone, or maybe they are alone in those thoughts, I think that would be very useful. Let's see, the other general thought I had is that most of our discussion and most of the analysis has really centered on the site that we're dealing with rather than the area plan. If I look at what we've been talking about for the last couple hours, but the area plan is equally important, although somewhat less urgent in the sense of, you know, the city doesn't own the area and isn't about to construct something. But I have to say that I wish that somehow we could focus, maybe just have a session on the area itself with explicitly not talking about the site, just to make sure that it gets the proper attention, because that affects a lot of people, both existing neighbors and those who will ultimately be affected by it. So that's my thoughts.
Great. David?
I think that I'll just agree very strongly with things that I've heard. I especially am interested in ways that we can increase the number of people we hear from, because I do realize that there are voices that we are not hearing, and I think that's really resonates with me. So a lot's been said on that, so I'll just leave it at that.
Well, thanks, David. Peter?
I do think you've been doing a great job with the outreach, and I thought what John said was really beautiful about hearing people and acknowledging how they're heard. Not that that's not being done, but I just wanted to echo that. And I'll go back to something that I said and drew laughter 2 years ago, but I still think is important now more than ever. And it's really simple. And it's simple, yet these things don't happen overnight or by themselves. So we've got Bands on the Bricks. I don't know why we don't have Hootenanny on the helipad. Why aren't we getting together on that big empty parking lot at all different times of the weekend, of different beautiful summer afternoons where people can go and be together? We've got this great block party trailer that the city sends out. That's sending this emissary out to the communities that are using it, and all of those communities are coming together and organizing. They should know that there'll be a conclave of anyone who's ever had a block party trailer to all get together and meet every other neighborhood that's had a block party trailer and do it on this site and really breathe some life into it. I love seeing the green spray painted word love on the sign that went up just recently after they took the hospital sign down. I think it's great. So here's this site that is begging for love, and this other concept of legacy and prophecy. What was there? to have a gathering on a helipad where it's been the site of a lot of pain and death and sorrow and life. Let's acknowledge that space and let's come together as a community and use something that we already own. We own that land, and porta potties don't cost that much. And local businesses will come together to sponsor an event or 2 or 4. So to me, it's a wasted opportunity, and it's staring us in the face around community engagement.
Brilliant.
Okay, I'm going to be dream crusher here just a little bit. We love the idea, but, we keep trying. We haven't actually had control of the property until
That's true. You're right.
And there's going to be a big fence that's going to start there for deconstruction use. So while we will try, there are constraints.
Think about carving the fence back a touch for one
I think we can
celebration.
There might be that.
Yeah, just on that note, I was just in Portland for a conference, and there's a great downtown parking lot where they've left it as a parking lot, but the last stall on the perimeter has been taken out, and they've wrapped the entire thing with food trucks, right? So that just that one stall was something they could use to activate the street in a way that was incredibly fantastic, but they still have the parking in the middle. I don't know if like wrapping in food trucks is the right idea, but you get it. Sarah?
So I actually want to turn to the language that you all used in the proposal or in the packet, which was to limit, that in the next stage of community engagement is to limit to inform and consult. And perhaps I'm misunderstanding the words, but it strikes me that I know you want to move this process along, but everything I'm hearing here actually is involve and collaborate as well. And versus here's what we're doing and what do you think? I think the fact that we still have 4 options, maybe 5 if a new one is in fact developed, on the table, there's still a lot of involvement and collaboration to come. And I just, I'm not a community engagement expert, and maybe I'm misunderstanding these words, but I really feel like there's still a lot of community participation, real participation to be had.
If I can just jump in on that. I think we go back to some of the words that we brought from the IAP2, the International Association of Public Participation, as well as the city's community engagement strategic framework, where collaborate has a little more of decision-making power within the community, and we know within this process the actual decision-making power is with the council and the planning board. I would say that the line between consult and involve, because we are asking for some help in crafting and recrafting and helping these materials, is there's some room there.
Mm-hmm.
That was it.
Yeah, I think my read on that, it's a really interesting question, is that also that the involve and collaborate, usually when we use this matrix, it implies that the other parties are all contributing resources and doing work collaboratively. But it's all a gradient, right? And the sort of lines between those things are just sort of struck at a certain point. Anything else, or Carmen? Okay.
So my comment on community engagement is that I do think that staff's approach towards a more granular area planning process running simultaneously with probably a much less granular than one would normally consider site planning to be site planning process is a good way to go. I don't think there's a cart being put before the horse, nor do I think that that the work that we've seen in front of us is really focused on that 2x3 block site per se. I see this as being an area plan for the whole 4x6 block area that's described in the area. So I'm comfortable both with the process, the planning process of simultaneous site and area planning, and also the focus of doing the more integral site as well as the more overall area at the same time. I think your community outreach, if it follows the the principles that we used in the last few community outreach projects, including the comp plan. And it sounds like that's the direction we're headed. They've been working, and I think they're already working, and they're going to keep working. So I'm happy with the way that's going. And then I just really echo David and Lupita about hearing from the person who's hard to hear from, maybe a few stops into Illegal Pete's, or, inviting people who are just here for the day. They've got 1 hour a day that they can actually give up, and it's called lunchtime. Maybe feed a few folks and ask for their opinions if they live outside of town and work here. I think people feel like they might jinx themselves. There are only 120 units or 200 units or whatever that are going to be available. So who am I to say I want to be the person who participates in this, city study about what my housing needs are? I'm probably going to be stuck out here in Firestone for as long as it takes for me to get 2 or 3 promotions so I can afford to live in Boulder. And God knows what that place is going to cost by the time I get those promotions. Better to just give them a low-pressure opportunity to come and talk, which I think lunch might be a good one. That's just an example of, or a suggestion.
Cool. I think, I'll kick off the next one for you, Lupita, but on community engagement planning, I think the other contextual piece I just want to bring back from, something that Liz Payton used to say when she was on this board is that when you're really working with the neighborhood and the immediate area around the potential project or in the area plan, one of the larger contextualizing questions is like, what can your neighborhood do to satisfy these larger community goals that we do have in the comp plan? And I think it's really important for us all to hold the idea that the comp plan is the thing that everyone has weighed in on. Everybody did have an opportunity to say stuff in there and Christmas tree with whatever they wanted to do. That's where those community values are set up. And then you did a sort of a subcategory of that, the vision plan for this area. And I think, if you're doing surveys or if you're doing engagement with neighbors, it's not so much about like how do you keep people out and keep yours, and it's more about like how can you serve the wider, broader good. Lupita, do you want to talk about does Planning Board agree with the approach for further assessment of flood mitigation?
Oh, I feel like I should yield my colleague.
Yeah, John.
It's been itching to speak, so you can take
I'll get my words in anyway.
Yes. I don't know how many extra minutes he can get out of me.
Okay, John's going to bust. Okay, John. Wait, no, let's do David first. No, I'm just kidding. John, go ahead.
No, please.
Well, I was surprised by the recommendation from staff on this, and so I was wondering if we could pursue it a little bit. It seems to me that my immediate response is surprise, because it seems to me that when we're making such a significant investment in such an area that is subject to flood concerns, one would think that this is a logical place to begin, even if we can't complete the flood mitigation arrangements for Goose Creek. And so I just wanted to get some more feedback from staff.
Right, and I covered this very, very briefly in the presentation because the City Council had a little more information on this at our meeting when we talked with them on May 16th. But there was more information in your packet, in the memo, as well as in the attachment about the flood mitigation. I'm going to ask Douglas Sullivan to come up and talk a little bit more about, to help me, because I can muddle through some of the responses on this, but Douglas can provide a little more information. And I think, Douglas, you speak very well to how this piece fits in with the rest of Goose Creek and what our opportunities are with all of the rest of it. And I have some of the maps if that's helpful to pull up.
Okay, thanks, Jean. Douglas Sullivan, Principal Engineer for Utilities. So I am very familiar with Goose Creek. It's been studied a lot, and there's been a lot of capital improvements done over the last 20 or 30 years. We normally wouldn't provide that much background in a particular memo, but I thought a little bit of context was important, which is why if you saw the council memo, or maybe yours as well, there was a bit in terms of what's happened over a bit. So Goose Creek has a confluence with Boulder Creek out east, just near the Municipal Services Center, where it dumps in. And there were 4 projects over about a 20-year period, 4 capital projects, what we call major drainageway work. And all of those projects were designed to accommodate what's called the 100-year storm event. And those projects culminated about 10 or 12 years ago at the vicinity of Edgewood there and Folsom. And there was a decision by staff with a healthy public process at that time to decide whether that level of improvement would continue to the west. And for those of you planning board members that know that area quite well along Edgewood, there are 29 homes on the south side of Edgewood, and Goose Creek is in an unimproved channel behind that location between 19th and Folsom. And the decision was made at that time not to attempt to purchase those homes. I say purchase because in the stormwater and flood management utility, there is an actual line item for pre-flood acquisition. And so when we are anticipating significant projects anywhere in the community in the 15 drainageways, we identify properties that we want to buy specifically. Now we target those that are specifically in the high hazard zone, not in the floodplain, because there are thousands in the floodplain and we probably have on the order of 200 in the high hazard zone. So we're sort of moving, upstream here. There are improvements that are necessary when you get up into the upper reaches of Upper Goose. And so there are a couple things going on right now. One of our staff that may have spoken to you before, Katie Knapp, is doing a project, and it's called a mitigation study, and it takes into account both Upper Goose Creek and 2 Mile, which comes into Goose Creek in the vicinity where I spoke of. In addition, we completed a stormwater master plan in 2017, and one of the things that comes out of a master plan are what we call Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 improvements. Those are high, medium, and low priority. And the highest priority for the storm pipe system is actually in the Upper Goose Creek Basin, anywhere between 4th and down into the very area around North and the area we're talking about. So the last piece in wrapping up here to explain what's going on is it was not possible to move ahead with those storm sewer improvements on the very west end of town and put an increased amount of flow into an unimproved channel, whereby there was not capacity and you would risk damage to those homes. So in our capital improvements program in the year 2023, we have a $24 million project identified, and half of that is for storm sewer improvements, and half of it is for what we call open channel improvements. But we have already identified the fact that utilities as a whole will be moving ahead with open channel improvements in that Edgewood area that would accommodate flows in the 5 or 10-year capacity, not the 100-year. And so, to John's point, it has been studied extensively, but without larger capacity downstream, it would be pretty unrealistic to look at options that would inundate a property to where you would create 100-year improvements at the very upper reaches. You've probably heard a lot from staff members that talk about the stormwater and flood management utilities needs relative to the others. They are significant. We're underfunded relative to what those needs are. And so 10 or 15 years ago, the focus then moved to some of the other drainage ways for the very large capital projects. You've heard about South Boulder Creek. 4 Mile was a big one, specifically in the area of Crestview Elementary. And of course, Wonderland Creek recently, was completed in the last year or so. So I'm happy to answer a number of questions. It's a long answer, but I sort of wanted to set the foundation for how we move from east to west.
That was a great recap. Thank you so much. John, or anybody else, do you have any questions on this to follow that up?
Yeah, I don't intend to debate the decision or anything like that, but it seems to me that in a situation where ultimately it may take 100 years or something like that to get Goose Creek up to the 100-year capacity all the way down, or some long period. But I'm just concerned about the logic of an area plan and a site plan with the expenditure of X million dollars that doesn't take into account the future of moving the flood through the area, even if downstream it still can't handle it. This is the time, it seems to me, that we should be talking about that, and where there's construction taking place, having that be done in accordance with the 100-year movement of the 100-year flood.
Can I just, before you answer that, just add a little bit of color to it? I think the mechanism that you would use to do that, which they're using at Rosewood and Broadway and other projects, is to do the upstream improvements, but then still put a barrier in the flood channel that releases at the historic flow to not cause that downstream impact, because we're not really allowed to do that through FEMA regulations or city regulations. So
I
is that,
understand, but I guess I don't want to.
No,
I'm just passing.
That's what's going through my mind.
Your question is a fair one, and I would say the staff and utilities as a whole in the city does a good job of looking to the future with respect of all of the major drainage ways. I think what's probably a little bit different here is the flows are a lot less on the upstream reaches, because like any drainage way, the flows get bigger as tributaries come in. So what's leaving North Boulder Park, which is effectively the headwaters, doesn't have an upstream basin on the size of many of the others, like a 2 Mile or some others. I also think we're entering a period where we're realistic given the amount of development along the drainage ways that's happened since Boulder started to develop 50 or 60 years ago. And that's that there are physical limitations and economic limitations in terms of what you could do. For those of you that know Gregory Creek, that comes down from Chautauqua, and there was the first of what we anticipate several projects just completed down at 9th Street in the vicinity of Arapahoe there. And we are looking forward to complete improvements that will accommodate a 10-year storm event. And there are a significant number of homes. The drainage way is narrow and it's steep. The houses are prohibitively expensive there. And so you do a matrix and you identify what the critical goals are, like on the planning side as well. And the goal is to help the community in ways that are feasible.
Mm-hmm. Sort of the question of, if you have $1, where is it best spent from a macro perspective?
So
Sarah?
I may be asking a question that you've just answered, but in one of the statements in the packet said that you were going to focus on site-specific flood mitigation and not flood mitigation for the surrounding community. And maybe this has to do with this being the headwaters, and so there's less. But I'm just curious, what are the downsides vis-a-vis the surrounding community of only focusing on flood mitigation at, I believe, must be the hospital site?
I mean, there would be the obvious downside if you were doing that and only focusing on the hospital site, because you wouldn't have a good understanding of what was happening in the downstream reaches. The mitigation plan that's going on for Upper Goose Creek is looking at the upper reaches all the way to North Boulder Park, down all the way to Folsom. So if we work back west just a little bit, there's that section of unimproved channel between 19th and Folsom. And at the very beginning of 19th, if you physically look in, there's sort of a concrete U-channel. Then you have 19th all the way to Broadway. And you have all sorts of development, commercial and residential. And then you have the pipe section, you know, sort of all the way up to 4th Street. So I would say utility staff is taking a comprehensive look at this, and we're in the mitigation process where we are reaching out to the community to look for ideas. A lot of this made the news years ago with respect to one of the proposals that proposed inundation at Long's Garden, for example. And so that outreach will continue. When we finish a mitigation plan, it basically leaves you with a couple options for how to proceed. Then you enter an engineering phase. And ultimately, you have to identify it in the CIP relative to the other needs.
Okay. So, I'm sorry, let me just add one thing. So one of the thoughts or questions I had had to do with, might it be useful to consider more green space in the area plan so that you have some more natural space to receive flood water?
So I'll probably kick the green space back to Jean, but I would say before, what's a little bit different than Goose Creek than some of the other, it's an ephemeral stream, and that there's not flow in it the vast majority of the year because it doesn't have that upper basin. So when we talk about a green space, you could certainly create a wide area to accommodate the channel, but without a lot of help, it would not represent in the form of the riparian corridors that many of the other ones do in the upstream reaches.
Okay, thank you.
And I will address on the other, and I think that's the thought for the area plan as far as just our regulations in general. There's quite a bit of this area that has a lot of impervious surface that has not been built to even our current design standards for landscaping. So any redevelopment in the area is going to help with impervious surface, and especially if we can enhance that with what we're trying to do with the area plan.
Yeah, really well put. David, anybody else want to have other?
Yeah, no, just from my knowledge, since I'm not an expert in this, but if the headwaters are at North Boulder Park, does that mean that in a 100-year event or something like that, water kind of like goes towards that area and then starts down the Goose Creek? Because it must be a place that kind of collects water off the foothills and
it
things.
Does.
And, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it becomes a center of where it all funnels into Goose Creek.
And then a lot of the water comes down Balsam. Yeah, and goes
streets
over.
and things
So,
like
we often speak in terms of drainage ways that have a defined channel where the water would be, and there's also shallow flooding. So when you see the floodplain maps, often they really inundate a significantly wide area. Obviously, the wider they are, the more shallow they are for the same flows, but it does indeed come down from the streets on the west side of.
So west of North Boulder Park, there's just no defined.
There is no defined channel until 19th, actually.
Oh, yeah, because it's going.
So to Gene's point, there is a lot of development and a lot of impervious area there.
That's true. Okay, thank you.
Cool, thank you, Douglas. I think you got more?
Yeah, so I just would conclude my thoughts by thanking you for explaining the city's staff's attitude. I still think a revision in that attitude is correct, but I think you all understand my thoughts there, so.
Fair enough.
Lupita?
Yeah, for my peace of mind, when we had the floods of, 2013, I saw one of the reports from the engineering, one of the engineering companies in the area where they referred to the 100-year flood and the 500-year flood. I had a lot of fun looking at it, but in my mind, I said, well, is this truly 100-year flood anymore? And I'm wondering if, in your simulations and, forecasting, has there been any adjustment to anything that may be linked to, floods happening a lot faster, more often? Is there anything to that?
That's a great question, and I would say there has not been significant change in the last few years. One of the interesting that was completed after the 2013 flood was staff and the community very much wanted to know how much water was in all the drainage ways. And so we did a tremendous amount of outreach in churches and schools and communities to have people come and physically draw on maps and show literally whether they thought they had floodwaters or shallow flooding or wastewater in their basements and stuff like that. And so we did look at all 15 drainage ways, and some of them presented with a 10-year storm, some of them with the 25 or 50, and there were a few that had a 100-year queue associated with it. What was very confusing at the time is that it was a historic rainfall event. From a statistical standpoint, it was in excess of 1 in 1,000 year. But what happened over 7 days, you had supersaturated soils, so the water had nowhere to go. But it never had the intensity to trigger the significant floods. So we are very aware that a significant flooding event could be far more expensive and far more dangerous than what we had in 2013.
That's great. I appreciate we were able to make you sort of earn your pay for tonight, staying until the last item. So it's unlike some of the other things in this process. This is a good opportunity for us to really get a good understanding of this particular subject. So thank you for sticking around. I really appreciate it. So,
if there are any other questions, I'll sit in the row here.
Cool. Thanks. Any other questions on floodplains, or we all exhaust ourselves on that? Okay, and I just one last round, if anyone wants to make any sort of final comments on the process. We've basically completed all of the questions that staff has asked of us. Whether we did it really right or not is unclear. But it was also kind of nice a little bit to take a little bit more time to do this. I think City Council was very rushed because of their agenda, and by having the other applicant drop off, we were able to take a little bit more time with it. So thank you guys for sticking with us through that. Any other kind of comments or thoughts on this?
I want to thank anybody in the audience who was not forced to be here, that are still here. Appreciate it.
This is where the sausage is getting made. So,
this is where the recommendation of how to make the sausages get made.
Exactly.
That's right. It's very meta. I'll just say that we could maybe end in just restating that placemaking opportunities here are so incredible, and I think you've heard that from everybody. So I just wanted to end on a positive note. We're going to see something really amazing here, I hope.
Thank you, David.
I can end on another positive note. So as always, we would welcome any of the planning board members to attend any of the engagement events. So I know that all of you receive the planning emails. So when we have those dates and times, please let us know if there's some that you would like to attend, because I know that in the past when we've done that, I think it's been really helpful for community members to actually talk with the board members too, and to gain that perspective. So please feel free to know that you are invited.
Cool, thank you for that. And I would add encouragement to that too, because when you get to go to these events, it really adds some color to how you see the process going, and I think it's really useful. Whether you end up on an ad hoc team or on a task force or something like that for this or other projects, it's great to get to see how it goes. So I guess we're done with that item under matters. So thank you guys really hugely for sticking that out and for doing all the work you're doing. It's amazing how much work you guys accomplish. Cindy, do we have any other matters?
Not that I'm aware of.
Cool. Anything from another board member? We're all good? Okay, do we have any calendar check or meeting debrief items that we need to do?
No, we just have a meeting on June 20th, and the packet should go out tomorrow. Well, part of the packet, some of it will go out tomorrow, some of it will go out Monday.
So good, so we get like 12 hours off?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you will be getting a courier package, so.
Great.
Thank you.
I'm going to weigh in on just how much I like it when the packet's released once completely, but I know that's something out of your control.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's out of my control too. All right, I'm going to call this meeting over. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Live from Paris en France 24.